When a single father working maintenance at a luxury hotel noticed a powerful CEO collapsing at the bar, everyone else looked away. But Adrian Cole didn't hesitate. He saw a woman dying right in front of him while the world pretended not to notice. What happened next would pull him into her dangerous world of corporate warfare, betray every assumption people made about who deserves power, and prove that one split-second decision could rewrite two lives forever. This is their story. If you want to see how far this journey goes, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see where this story reaches. Now let's begin. Adrian Cole stood in the employee corridor behind the hotel kitchen, rolling his shoulders to loosen the knots that had settled there over the course of a 12-hour shift. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering occasionally in that way that made him think he should probably add "replace hallway bulbs" to the endless maintenance list he kept in his back pocket. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, his hands still smelled faintly of industrial cleaner despite 2 washes, and his lower back ached in that specific way that told him he'd spent too long crouched under a leaking sink earlier that afternoon. He checked his phone. One text from his daughter Mia, sent 3 hours ago. "Finished homework. Mac and cheese okay for dinner?" He typed back quickly. "Perfect. Save me some. Home by 11. 32 years old, and this was his life. Wake up at 5, get Mia ready for school, work until his feet went numb. Come home to a kid who deserved better than reheated pasta, and a dad too tired to ask about her day properly." He wasn't complaining, not really. Mia was everything. But some nights, when he stood in hallways like this one, smelling other people's expensive meals and hearing laughter from the bar that he'd never be invited to join, he felt the weight of every choice that had led him here. "Adrian, you still on?" The voice crackled through the radio clipped to his belt. He unhooked it. "Yeah, what's up?" "Got a situation in the Oak Room. Wine spill on the carpet. Big one." "On my way." He grabbed his kit from the supply closet and headed toward the hotel's main floor, leaving behind the utilitarian grayness of the employee areas for the warm lighting and thick carpets of the guest spaces. The Meridian was one of those hotels that catered to people who didn't look at prices, the kind of place where a bottle of water cost $12 and the lobby smelled like lavender and money. Adrian had worked here for 3 years, and he'd gotten good at moving through these spaces without being seen. Invisible labor, someone had called it once. He'd laughed at that. Invisible until something broke. The Oak Room was adjacent to the hotel bar, a semi-private lounge area where groups gathered for after-work drinks or pre-dinner cocktails. When Adrian arrived, he found exactly what he'd expected: a massive red wine stain spreading across cream-colored carpet, a flustered server apologizing to a table of annoyed-looking business types, and a manager already on his phone probably calculating the cost of professional cleaning. "I've got it," Adrian said, kneeling down with his kit. The manager barely looked at him. "Make it fast. We've got a private event starting in this section in 20 minutes. Adrian didn't bother responding. He'd learned a long time ago that half the job was just letting people feel like they'd given you orders, even when you were already doing exactly what needed to be done. He worked quickly, blotting and treating the stain, working from the outside in to keep it from spreading. Around him, conversations continued as if he wasn't there. "Heard Vaughn Industries is imploding. She's too young for that role, always has been." Her father would be horrified. Adrian tuned it out. Rich people love talking about other rich people's problems. It was white noise to him. He finished with the stain, packed up his kit, and stood. The manager gave him a curt nod and immediately turned away. Adrian headed back toward the corridor, but something made him glance toward the bar as he passed. That's when he saw her. She was sitting alone at the far end of the bar, her posture so rigidly perfect it looked painful. Dark hair pulled back severely, a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and a barely touched glass of water in front of her. But it wasn't her appearance that stopped him. It was the way her hand gripped the edge of the bar, white-knuckled, trembling, and the way her breathing had gone shallow and rapid. Adrian had seen that look before. Not here, not in a place like this, but he'd seen it. His ex-wife had an older brother who'd had seizures. Adrian had learned to recognize the signs of a medical emergency, that specific quality of wrongness that most people missed because they weren't looking. This woman was in trouble. He took a step closer, watching. Her face had gone pale, a thin sheen of sweat visible on her forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at nothing, and nobody around her seemed to notice or care. The bartender was at the other end, mixing drinks. The other patrons were absorbed in their own conversations. Adrian moved to the bar, positioning himself a few feet away from her. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond immediately. Her breathing was getting worse, short and labored. Then her eyes flickered to him, and for just a second he saw pure fear. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice was thready and weak. "Just need a minute." "You don't look fine." Adrian kept his voice low, non-threatening. "Do you need me to call someone? A doctor?" "No." The word came out sharp, almost panicked. "No doctors, no. I just need—" Her hand slipped from the bar, and Adrian moved instinctively, catching her elbow before she could slide off the stool. Up close, he could see her pupils were dilated. Her lips had a faint bluish tint, and her skin felt cold and clammy under his hand. "Hey," he said, his voice firm now. "Stay with me. What's happening? Are you having an allergic reaction?" Her eyes focused on him again, and he saw the moment she made some kind of calculation, weighing her options. "Yes," she whispered. "Severe allergy. But I can't let anyone—" She was fading. Adrian could see it happening, her body starting to shut down even as she fought to maintain control. He looked around quickly. Still nobody paying attention. The bartender had his back turned. This woman could die right here, and it would be 10 minutes before anyone noticed. "Okay," Adrian said, making a decision. "Can you walk?" "I don't know." "We're going to find out. Where's your medication? Do you have an EpiPen?" "Home," she managed. "At home." "Where's home?" She gave him an address, the words coming out in gasps. It was close, maybe 15 minutes away. Adrian did the math. Ambulance would take at least that long to arrive, maybe longer. And she'd said no doctors, which meant there was something else going on here, something about exposure or privacy that she was more afraid of than dying. Stupid. It was a stupid risk. But he'd already made the decision, really, the moment he'd seen her struggling to breathe. "All right," he said. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to lean on me, and we're going to walk out of here like you've had too much to drink, and I'm helping you to a cab. Can you do that?" She nodded, barely. Adrian put his arm around her waist, taking most of her weight as he helped her off the stool. She was taller than he'd expected, probably 5'9" in the heels she was wearing, but she felt fragile, her body trembling with the effort of staying upright. He guided her toward the exit, moving slowly, keeping his expression neutral. They made it to the lobby. Nobody stopped them. Nobody even looked twice. Just another drunk hotel guest being escorted out. Adrian felt a flash of anger at that. How easy it was for people to look away from someone in crisis. But he pushed it down. Not helpful right now. Outside, the cool evening air hit them both. The woman gasped, drawing in deeper breaths, but Adrian could tell she was still deteriorating. He needed to move faster. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked, scanning the street for a cab. "Elena," she said. Elena Vaughn. The name meant nothing to him, though he had a vague sense he'd heard it recently, probably from those conversations he'd been ignoring. "I'm Adrian. I'm going to get you home, Elena. Just stay with me." A cab pulled up, and Adrian helped her into the back seat, giving the driver the address she'd provided. The driver glanced at them in the rearview mirror, clearly making his own assumptions about what was happening, but he started the meter without comment. Elena slumped against the door, her breathing ragged. Adrian watched her carefully, looking for signs that she was about to lose consciousness completely. He'd been an EMT for exactly 6 months, 8 years ago, before Mia was born and life had gotten complicated. He'd washed out of the program, unable to balance the schedule with a failing marriage and a baby on the way. But he remembered enough. He remembered that allergic reactions could kill you in minutes, that anaphylaxis didn't care about your job or your reputation or your fear of being seen as weak. "Tell me about the medication," he said, partly to keep her talking, partly because he needed to know what he was looking for. "What kind is it? Where do you keep it?" "Bathroom," Elena said, each word an effort. "Medicine cabinet, red case, injectable." "Epinephrine?" "Yes. 2 doses. Use 1. "Have you used it before?" "Twice." "I know how it works." The cab wove through traffic, and Adrian kept his hand on Elena's shoulder, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone, that someone was paying attention. She had her eyes closed now, conserving energy, but her hand found his and gripped it hard enough to hurt. "Don't let me pass out," she said. "If I pass out, before we get there—" "You're not going to pass out," Adrian said with more confidence than he felt. "We're almost there, 5 minutes." It was actually 8, but she didn't need to know that. The building, when they arrived, was exactly what he'd expected. One of those converted historic structures in the center of the city, all glass and steel and doormen. The kind of place where the lobby probably had better furniture than Adrian's entire apartment. He paid the cab driver with money he couldn't really afford to spend and helped Elena out onto the sidewalk. The doorman started toward them, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to concern. "Ms. Vaughn, is everything—" "She's fine," Adrian said quickly, "just not feeling well. She asked me to help her upstairs." The doorman hesitated, looking between them. Adrian could see him trying to figure out who Adrian was, what this situation meant, whether he should call someone. Elena must have sensed it too, because she straightened slightly and managed to make her voice sound almost normal. "It's all right, Marcus. This is a friend. I just need to lie down." The word friend was clearly a stretch, but it worked. Marcus stepped back, though his expression remained doubtful. "Do you need me to call Dr. Reeves?" "No," Elena said. "Thank you. No." They made it to the elevator, and Adrian pressed the button for the penthouse level because, of course, she lived in the penthouse. The elevator was mirrored, and he caught sight of their reflection. This woman in her expensive suit and him in his wrinkled maintenance uniform. Her leaning heavily against him, both of them looking like they'd survived something. The elevator opened directly into her apartment, which was somehow both impressive and unsurprising. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, art on the walls that was probably worth more than Adrian's truck, but he didn't have time to take it in. Elena was fading fast, her weight growing heavier against him. "Bathroom," he said. "Where?" She gestured weakly down a hallway, and Adrian half carried her in that direction, his heart pounding. He found the master bathroom, all marble and glass and completely unnecessary luxury, and propped Elena against the counter while he yanked open the medicine cabinet. There. Red case, right where she'd said. He grabbed it, flipped it open, and found 2 auto-injectors of epinephrine, along with antihistamine pills and a laminated instruction card. His hands were shaking, but he forced them steady. He'd done this before, in training. He could do it now. "Elena," he said, "I need you to tell me where." She pulled up the sleeve of her jacket, exposing her upper arm. "There. Outer muscle. Push hard." Adrian removed the safety cap, positioned the injector, and pressed it against her arm, clicking the trigger. The spring-loaded needle deployed with a sharp snap, and he held it in place for the required 10 seconds, counting them off in his head. When he pulled it back, Elena was already breathing differently, still labored, but deeper, more controlled. "Okay," he said. "That's one. Do you need the second dose?" "Wait," she said. "Give it 5 minutes. If I'm not improving, then yes." Adrian set a timer on his phone and helped her to the floor, where she could lean back against the bathtub. Her color was already starting to return, the blue tinge fading from her lips. He grabbed a washcloth, ran it under cold water, and handed it to her. She pressed it against her forehead, her eyes closed. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We're not done." They sat in silence for a few minutes, Adrian watching the timer on his phone and Elena's breathing with equal intensity. Gradually, the tightness in her chest seemed to ease. She opened her eyes, looked at him, and some of the terror had faded from her expression. "I think it's working," she said. I can breathe." "Good. That's good." Adrian felt some of the tension leave his own shoulders. "What caused it? Do you know?" "Wine," Elena said, her voice still rough but stronger. "Red wine. I'm allergic to sulfites, severely. I never drink it, but tonight I was stressed, distracted. The bartender brought me a glass, said it was from someone at the other end of the bar, and I took a sip before I realized what it was. Jesus. 1 sip did this? 1 sip is all it takes." She closed her eyes again. "I'm an idiot. I know better." "You're not an idiot. You're human. Humans make mistakes." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Not me. I'm not allowed to." Adrian didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He just sat with her on the bathroom floor, this stranger he'd pulled out of a hotel bar, and waited for the medication to do its job. His phone buzzed. A text from Mia. "You okay? It's late." He texted back, "Fine. Work stuff. Be home soon." Another lie. Another night of being somewhere other than where he was supposed to be, doing something other than what he'd planned. But looking at Elena, this woman who'd almost died because she was too afraid to call for help, too worried about what it would mean to be seen as weak, he couldn't regret it. "Why didn't you want anyone to know?" he asked. "At the hotel. Why no doctors, no ambulance?" Elena opened her eyes, and for a moment he thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she sighed. "Because tomorrow morning I have the most important meeting of my life," she said. "And if anyone finds out that I collapsed in a hotel bar tonight, if there's any kind of public record or rumor or whisper, they'll use it against me. They'll say I'm unstable, that I can't handle the pressure, that I'm not fit to lead, and they'll be right." "They won't be right." "You don't know that. I know you just survived something that would have killed most people, and you're already thinking about work tomorrow. That doesn't sound unstable to me. That sounds tough as hell." She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You don't know me." "No," Adrian agreed. "I don't. But I know what I saw. And I saw someone fighting like hell to stay in control, even when her own body was betraying her." Elena's timer went off. 5 minutes. She took a deep breath, testing her lungs, and nodded. "I think I'm okay. I don't think I need the second dose." "You sure?" "Yes. The antihistamines now, and I should be stable." Adrian found the pills, brought her a glass of water from the sink, and watched as she took them. Her hands were still trembling, but her color was better, her breathing almost normal. She was going to be okay. The realization hit him with a wave of relief so strong it left him dizzy. "You should still see a doctor," he said. "Get checked out properly." "I will." "Tomorrow, after the meeting, I have a physician who handles things discreetly." "Of course you do." She smiled at that, a real smile this time, tired but genuine. "You must think I'm insane." "I think you're scared of something," Adrian said. "And I think whatever's happening tomorrow must be pretty damn important if you'd rather risk dying than let people know you're vulnerable." "It is important." Elena pulled herself up, using the edge of the tub for support. Adrian stood, ready to help if she needed it, but she managed on her own. "I'm CEO of Vaughn Industries. My father started the company 40 years ago, built it into what it is now. When he died 2 years ago, I took over. I was 28, youngest CEO in the company's history. And there are people on the board who have been waiting for me to fail ever since. Let me guess. Tomorrow's meeting is them trying to push you out. An emergency board vote on my leadership. They're going to argue that I'm inexperienced, that I'm making reckless decisions, that the company needs mature guidance, which is code for, we don't trust a woman in her 30s to run a multi-billion-dollar company, no matter whose daughter she is." Adrian leaned against the sink, processing this. "And if they find out you had a medical emergency tonight, it becomes proof that I can't handle the stress, that I'm falling apart, that they were right to question me." Elena met his eyes. "I've worked for 2 years to prove them wrong. I can't let one mistake undo all of that." "It wasn't a mistake, it was an accident. In my world, there's no difference." They stood in silence for a moment, the bathroom light harsh and unflattering, showing every line of exhaustion on both their faces. Adrian thought about his own life, the constant struggle to keep his head above water, the fear that one wrong move would send everything crashing down. Maybe he and this CEO weren't so different after all. Different tax brackets, same terror. "You should rest," he said finally. "You've been through hell. Your body needs time to recover." "I can't. I have to prepare. I have to be ready for tomorrow. Elena, you almost died an hour ago. You need to sleep. I need to win tomorrow." Her voice was firm, but he could hear the exhaustion underneath. "If I don't, everything my father built, everything I've fought for, it's gone. 23,000 employees, most of them with families, all depending on me to keep this company running. I can't let them down." Adrian recognized the sound of someone who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. He'd heard it in his own voice often enough. "What time's the meeting?" he asked. 9 a.m. He checked his watch. Almost midnight. "That gives you 9 hours. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drink some water, eat something if you can stomach it, and sleep for at least 6 hours. Then you're going to wake up, review whatever you need to review, and walk into that meeting knowing you survived something most people couldn't. That's not weakness. That's proof you don't quit. You're very bossy for someone who was cleaning wine off a carpet 2 hours ago. Yeah, well, you're very stubborn for someone who almost died on a bar stool. She laughed, and this time it sounded real, not bitter. Fair point. Adrian helped her to her bedroom, another space that screamed money and power and careful control, and made sure she had water on the nightstand and her phone within reach. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking smaller somehow, more human, without the armor of her suit and her perfectly controlled expression. "You're going to leave now, aren't you?" she said. It wasn't a question. "I should. I have a daughter waiting for me at home." "How old?" 10. "Her name's Mia." Elena nodded. "You're a good father, I can tell." "I try. Doesn't always work out." "Trying is more than a lot of people manage." She paused. "Adrian, what you did tonight, you saved my life. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me you'll actually rest." "I promise." She met his eyes. "And I promise I'll be careful. No more accepting drinks from strangers. No more taking risks with my health." "Good." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. "Adrian, what's your last name?" "Cole." "Adrian Cole." "Adrian Cole," she repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I won't forget what you did tonight." "Just when you're meeting tomorrow," he said. "That'll be thanks enough." Outside, the city was quieter now, the streets less crowded. Adrian caught a bus home because he couldn't afford another cab and spent the 40-minute ride thinking about everything that had just happened. He'd saved someone's life, just walked into a situation, made a choice, and kept someone breathing when they would have stopped. It didn't feel heroic. It felt necessary and a little bit terrifying and completely surreal. He got home just after 1 a.m. Mia was asleep on the couch, the TV still on, playing some show she'd probably lost interest in hours ago. Adrian turned it off, covered her with a blanket, and stood looking at her for a long moment. This kid was his whole world. Everything he did, every choice he made, came back to making sure she had a better life than he'd had. But tonight, for a few hours, he'd been something other than just Mia's dad or a maintenance worker or someone struggling to get by. He'd been someone who mattered, someone whose actions had real consequences. It felt good. It felt dangerous. It felt like something he couldn't afford to get used to. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Home safe. Thank you again. E." He saved the number, not sure why, and typed back, "Good luck tomorrow." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I'll need it." Adrian set his phone aside and headed to his own bedroom, bone-tired and wide awake at the same time. Tomorrow, Elena would walk into her boardroom and fight for her company. Tomorrow, he'd go back to fixing leaks and replacing light bulbs and being invisible. Their lives would return to their separate tracks, and tonight would become just a story. The time he helped a CEO. The strange night when 2 different worlds collided for a few hours. But as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that he'd seen behind a curtain he wasn't supposed to see behind, and now he couldn't unknow what was there. People like Elena Vaughn, powerful, successful, seemingly untouchable, they were just as scared and fragile as everyone else. They just hid better. He thought about what she'd said. 23,000 employees, families depending on her, the weight of her father's legacy. All of that resting on the shoulders of a woman who was younger than Adrian, who'd almost died tonight because of one distracted moment. And he thought about the way she'd looked at him when he'd told her she was tough, not weak. Like nobody had ever said that to her before. Like she'd needed to hear it more than she'd needed the medication. Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and full of dreams he couldn't quite remember. But one image stayed with him. Elena's hand gripping his in the back of that cab, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that was trying to pull her under. When his alarm went off at 5, Adrian got up and started his day the way he always did. Made breakfast for Mia, packed her lunch, got her on the bus, headed to work. Back to the hotel, back to the fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial cleaner. Back to being invisible. But at 9 a.m., while he was replacing a broken door handle on the 3rd floor, he stopped and checked his phone. No messages. He didn't know if that was good or bad. Didn't know if Elena had walked into that meeting strong or if the events of last night had caught up with her. Didn't know if she'd won or lost, or if his small act of help had mattered at all in the end. He told himself it didn't matter, that he'd done what he could, and the rest was out of his hands, that her world and his world were never going to intersect again, and that was fine. That was how it was supposed to be. He almost believed it. At 11:30, his phone rang. Unknown number, but he recognized it from last night. Adrian stepped into an empty hallway and answered. Hello? Adrian Cole? The voice was professional, clipped, not Elena. Yeah, who's this? My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Ms. Elena Vaughn. She'd like to know if you're available to meet with her this afternoon. Adrian's heart kicked up. Is she okay? She's fine. Better than fine, actually. She'd like to speak with you in person, if possible. Would 2 p.m. work? Yeah, I can make that work. He was supposed to be working until 6, but he'd figure it out. Where? Rebecca gave him an address, a different building from Elena's apartment, somewhere in the financial district. As for Ms. Chen at the front desk, I'll make sure you're cleared through security. Okay, can I ask what this is about? Ms. Vaughn will explain when you arrive. Thank you, Mr. Cole. She hung up before he could ask anything else. Adrian stood in the hallway, phone still in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. Elena wanted to meet with him, in person, in the middle of a workday, at what was probably her company's headquarters. Either the meeting had gone very well or very badly. He found his supervisor, claimed a family emergency, and got permission to leave early. He went home, changed out of his work clothes into the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have stains, and caught a train downtown. The whole way, his mind raced through possibilities. Maybe she just wanted to thank him properly. Maybe there was some legal thing he needed to sign. Maybe she was going to offer him money, and he'd have to figure out if taking it would feel like accepting charity or just being practical. The building was exactly what he'd expected, gleaming glass and steel, lobby full of people in expensive suits moving with purpose. Adrian gave his name at the desk, and within minutes Rebecca Chen appeared, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she could run a small country before lunch. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. Please, follow me. She led him to the elevators, used a keycard to access the executive floors, and brought him to a conference room with windows overlooking the city. Ms. Vaughn will be with you shortly. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thanks. Rebecca left, and Adrian was alone with the view and his own nerves. He'd spent so much time last night focused on keeping Elena alive that he hadn't really processed who she was, what her world looked like. Now standing in this conference room that probably cost more to furnish than he made in a year, the difference between their lives felt overwhelming. The door opened. Elena walked in, and Adrian barely recognized her. Not because she looked different, she'd traded last night's suit for a different one, dark navy instead of charcoal, but still all business. But because everything about her had changed. She moved differently, stood differently. The fear and vulnerability from last night were gone, replaced by something that looked like steel wrapped in silk. Adrian, she said, and smiled. Thank you for coming. You look better, he said, which was an understatement. She looked like she'd won a war. I feel better, and I have you to thank for that. She gestured to the conference table. Please, sit. He sat. She sat across from him, folding her hands on the table, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The meeting went well, I take it, Adrian said finally. The meeting went perfectly. Elena's smile widened. They tried everything, questioned my decisions, brought up every mistake from the past 2 years, painted me as reckless and inexperienced, and I shut them down. Every single argument, every doubt, I had an answer, I had data, I had proof that I know exactly what I'm doing, and when they called for the vote, I won. Unanimously. That's amazing. Congratulations. It is amazing, but here's the thing, Adrian. I couldn't have done it without last night, without you. She leaned forward slightly. When I walked into that boardroom this morning, I wasn't thinking about their doubts or their judgment. I was thinking about what you said, that surviving what I survived was proof I don't quit, that being tough enough to fight my own body and win meant I was tough enough to fight them. Adrian felt heat rise in his face. I just said what was obvious. No. You said what I needed to hear, and it made all the difference. Elena paused. I've been thinking about that, About how you saw a problem last night and just handled it. No hesitation, no fear. You assessed the situation, made a decision, and executed. Do you know how rare that is? I worked as an EMT for a while. You learn to act fast. It's more than that. Most people would have called 911 and walked away. Let someone else deal with it. You didn't, you stayed. You took responsibility for a stranger's life, and you didn't ask for anything in return. Adrian shifted uncomfortably. Where's this going, Elena? She smiled. Straight to the point. I like that. Here's where this is going. I want to offer you a job. He stared at her. What? I need someone I can trust. Someone who sees problems and solves them, who doesn't panic under pressure, who understands that the right choice isn't always the easy choice. Someone who proves every day that you don't need a fancy degree or the right connections to be capable of extraordinary things. That someone is you. Elena, I clean hotel rooms and fix toilets. That's exactly my point. Her eyes were intense, focused. You're wasted in that job. You have instincts, intelligence, decisiveness, all the things I need in my senior leadership team. I'm offering you a position as Director of Operations and Safety. You'd be overseeing facility management, risk assessment, and employee welfare across all our locations. It's a huge role, and yes, you'd need to learn a lot, but I think you can do it. More importantly, I know you will. Adrian's mind went blank. Director, senior leadership, this couldn't be real. You're serious, he said, completely serious. The salary is $220,000 a year, plus benefits, plus performance bonuses. You'd have a team of 12 reporting to you, and you'd report directly to me. I need an answer by the end of the week, but I'm hoping you'll say yes right now. $220,000. Adrian did the math automatically. That was more than 6 times what he made now. That was Mia's college fund. That was a real apartment instead of the cramped 2-bedroom they rented. That was breathing room for the first time in his adult life. It was also impossible. I don't have the qualifications, he said. I didn't finish college. I have no corporate experience. Your board would never... My board doesn't make this decision. I do. And I've already made it. Elena's voice was firm. You saved my life, Adrian. But more than that, you showed me who you are when everything's on the line. That's worth more than any resume. People will say you're hiring me out of gratitude, that it's not professional. People will say a lot of things. I stopped caring about that this morning when I won a fight everyone thought I'd lose. She leaned back. Look, I'm not going to force you. If you want to go back to the hotel and forget this conversation happened, you can. But I'm betting you won't. I'm betting you're tired of being overlooked, tired of doing work that doesn't matter, tired of settling for less than you're capable of. Am I wrong? She wasn't wrong. Of course she wasn't wrong. Think about it, Elena said when he didn't answer. Take the rest of the day, sleep on it, talk to your daughter. But Adrian, don't say no out of fear. Say no because you genuinely don't want it. Otherwise, you're just proving everyone who ever doubted you right. She stood, extending her hand. Adrian stood too, shook it, feeling like he was in someone else's life. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, his voice rough. I'll be waiting. He left the building in a daze, barely seeing the city around him. His phone rang 3 times on the way home. The hotel, probably wondering where he was, but he ignored it. He picked Mia up from school, took her for ice cream, and tried to figure out how to explain to a 10-year-old that their entire life might be about to change. Dad, you're being weird, Mia said, chocolate ice cream on her chin. What's going on? I got offered a new job today. Like, at a different hotel? At a company, an office job. It would mean better pay, better hours. I'd be home more. Mia's eyes lit up. Really? Really? But it's complicated. I'd be working with people who have way more experience than me. I'd probably make mistakes. People might think I don't belong there. Mia rolled her eyes, looking so much like her mother in that moment it hurt. Dad, you already work with people who think you're invisible. At least at this new place, you'd get paid more for it. Out of the mouths of children. That night, after Mia was asleep, Adrian sat at the kitchen table with a beer and thought about his life. He thought about his marriage falling apart because he couldn't provide enough, about dropping out of the EMT program because he couldn't make the schedule work, about every time he'd chosen the safe path because he was too scared to risk failure. He thought about being 32 and feeling 50, about watching Mia grow up wondering why her dad always looked tired and never had time. And he thought about Elena, walking into that boardroom and winning a battle she should have lost because someone had told her she was strong enough to fight. He pulled out his phone and typed, "I accept. When do I start?" The reply came 30 seconds later, Monday. Welcome to Vaughn Industries. Adrian set his phone down and let out a long breath. Either he'd just made the best decision of his life, or he was about to crash and burn in spectacular fashion. Only one way to find out. Adrian's first day at Vaughn Industries started with him standing in front of his bathroom mirror at 5:30 in the morning, trying to knot a tie he'd bought at a discount store the day before. His hands kept fumbling, muscle memory refusing to cooperate after years of not needing this particular skill. Mia appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "You look weird," she said. "Thanks, kiddo. Very helpful." "No, I mean, you look good, just different." She came closer, took the tie from his hands, and started fixing it herself. "Mom taught me this once, for a school thing." Adrian watched his daughter's small fingers work through the knot with surprising competence, and felt something twist in his chest. She was growing up, learning things without him, becoming capable in ways he kept missing. "There," Mia said, stepping back. "Now you look like a real office person." "Yeah, well, let's hope I can act like one too." The commute downtown took 45 minutes on the train, and Adrian spent the entire ride watching people in suits read their phones and drink their coffee, wondering if he'd ever look that comfortable in this world. He kept catching his reflection in the train windows, button-down shirt, khakis, the discount tie, and thinking he looked like a kid playing dress-up. Vaughn Industries occupied 12 floors of a building near the financial district. Adrian checked in at the lobby, got his badge and his photo taken, and was escorted up by Rebecca Chen, who'd called him 3 days ago with this life-changing offer. "Miss Vaughn is in meetings until 10, Rebecca said as they rode the elevator. "I'll take you to your office, get you set up with IT, and walk you through your schedule. Your direct reports have been notified of your appointment, and there's a team meeting scheduled for 11. "My direct reports." Adrian tested the words. They felt strange in his mouth. 12 people. Most of them have been with the company for years. They know their jobs well, but they've been without consistent leadership for the past 6 months. The previous director left rather suddenly. Why? Rebecca's expression didn't change. Creative differences with the executive team. You'll find your own approach, I'm sure. They reached the 10th floor, and Rebecca led him through a maze of cubicles and offices. People looked up as they passed, and Adrian felt their eyes tracking him, saw the questions forming. Who was this guy? Where did he come from? Why him? His office was corner placement, windows overlooking the city, furniture that was probably worth more than everything he owned. There was a desktop computer, dual monitors, a phone with more buttons than seemed necessary, and a stack of folders on the desk labeled with things like Q3 safety audit and facility compliance reports. "Your login credentials," Rebecca said, handing him a folder. "Your assistant is David. He sits right outside. He'll handle your calendar and scheduling. It will be up in about 20 minutes to get you connected to the network. Any questions?" "About 1,000. Adrian picked one. "Rebecca, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why me?" "Really? Elena said she trusts me, but that's not enough. There has to be more to it." Rebecca studied him for a moment, and something in her expression softened slightly. "Ms. Vaughn is brilliant, but she's also young, and she knows it. The board questions her constantly. Her previous senior leadership team was full of people her father hired, and half of them were actively undermining her. She needed fresh blood. People who owe their loyalty to her, not to the past. You saved her life, yes, but more importantly, you proved you'll act when everyone else freezes. That's valuable. Rare, actually. And if I screw up, if I'm not good at this, then you'll learn, or you won't, and you'll be replaced. That's how this works." Rebecca's tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. "But Ms. Vaughn doesn't usually make bad bets. If she thinks you can do this, you probably can." She left, and Adrian was alone in his office with the city spread out below him and a computer he didn't know how to log into. He sat in the chair, leather, expensive, comfortable in a way that felt vaguely guilty, and tried to imagine himself belonging here. IT showed up. A young guy named Marcus who got him logged in, explained the email system and the internal communications platform, and handed him a company phone. Your direct line's programmed in, and Rebecca's loaded your calendar. You've got access to all the operations databases and the safety reporting system. If you need anything else, just submit a ticket through the portal. Right, the portal. Marcus grinned. You look terrified. Is it that obvious? Little bit. Don't worry, man. First day's always rough. You'll figure it out. After Marcus left, Adrian spent 20 minutes just clicking through systems, trying to understand the scope of what he was supposed to be managing. Vaughn Industries had manufacturing facilities in 8 states, distribution centers in 12, and over 20,000 employees across all locations. His department was responsible for physical plant operations, workplace safety compliance, risk assessment, and emergency response protocols. It was overwhelming. It was impossible. His phone rang. The desk phone, not his cell. Adrian stared at it for 2 rings before remembering he was supposed to answer it. Adrian Cole. Adrian, it's Elena. How's your first morning treating you? Her voice was warm, casual, completely different from the professional distance she'd maintained during their one meeting. It threw him off balance. It's good. A lot to take in, but good. I'm sure it is. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up. You're 11 o'clock with the team. It's going to be tense. Some of them are excited about new leadership, but a few are skeptical. One in particular, Gerald Moss, was hoping to get promoted into your role. He's going to push back on you. Great. Any advice? Don't try to prove yourself in the first meeting. Just listen. Learn who's who, what their concerns are. You don't need to have all the answers today. Elena, I don't have any of the answers today. She laughed. Then you're honest, which puts you ahead of most people I work with. You'll be fine. And Adrian, welcome aboard. She hung up before he could respond. Adrian set the phone down and pulled up the files on his desk, determined to at least look informed when he walked into that conference room. The safety audit was a mess of data and compliance codes he barely understood. The facility reports were slightly better. He could parse out the basic infrastructure issues, things like aging HVAC systems and deferred maintenance schedules. But the budget projections and the operational metrics might as well have been written in Greek. At 10:45, David appeared in his doorway. Young, neat, efficient-looking. Mr. Cole, your team meeting's in 15 minutes. Conference room B. Can I get you anything before you head down? Coffee would be great. Black. On your desk in 5 minutes. David wasn't kidding. The coffee appeared almost instantly, and at exactly 10:55, Adrian found himself walking into a conference room where 12 people were already seated, all of them watching him with expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Morning, Adrian said, setting his coffee down at the head of the table. I'm Adrian Cole. I'm your new director, and I'm not going to waste time pretending I know more about this company than most of you do. I'm here to learn, to listen, and to help you do your jobs better. So let's start with introductions. Tell me your name, your role, and one thing you think this department needs to fix. There was a moment of surprised silence. Then a woman at the far end of the table spoke up. I'm Karen Wright, Senior Facilities Manager. We need better communication between maintenance teams and safety compliance. Right now we're working in silos and it's causing delays. Noted. Thanks, Karen. They went around the table. Most of the introductions were straightforward, people sharing legitimate concerns about budgets and staffing and outdated equipment. Then they got to a man in his 50s, gray hair, expensive suit, expression like he'd just smelled something rotten. Gerald Moss, he said. I oversee risk assessment and regulatory compliance. What this department needs is leadership with actual industry experience. No offense, Mr. Cole, but you're a maintenance supervisor with no relevant credentials, no corporate background, and no business sitting in that chair. Ms. Vaughn may have her reasons for hiring you, but the rest of us are left wondering if this is competence or favoritism. The room went dead silent. Everyone was looking at Adrian, waiting to see how he'd respond. This was the test, he realized. How he handled this moment would define everything that came after. None taken, Adrian said calmly. You're right. I don't have your experience or your credentials. I worked in a hotel fixing broken things and keeping systems running. But here's what I do have. I know how to see problems before they become crises. I know how to prioritize under pressure. And I know the difference between process and results. You want to question my qualifications, Gerald? Go ahead. But I'm here to do a job, and I'm going to do it well. You can help with that. Or you can keep explaining why I shouldn't be here. Your choice. Gerald's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Calculation, maybe. Reassessment. We'll see, he said. The meeting continued, and Adrian took notes on everything, asking questions when he didn't understand something, admitting ignorance when he needed to. It was humbling and exhausting, and he could feel judgment radiating from half the people in the room. But by the time they wrapped up, an hour later, a few faces had softened. Karen had smiled at one of his questions. A younger guy named Tom had offered to walk him through the safety reporting database. Small victories. Gerald left without a word, but Adrian knew that fight was far from over. The rest of the day was a blur of meetings, system tutorials, and drowning in information. At 6:30, when most of the office had cleared out, Rebecca appeared in his doorway. How'd it go? Adrian leaned back in his chair. Gerald Moss wants my head on a stick. Gerald Moss wanted your job. He'll get over it or he won't. How you handle him will tell the rest of the team who you really are. No pressure then. Rebecca smiled. You survived your first day. That counts for something. Ms. Vaughn wanted me to remind you there's a senior leadership dinner Wednesday night. Business casual, spouses welcome if you have one. I don't. Then it's just you. 7 o'clock, details will be in your calendar. She left, and Adrian packed up his things, feeling like he'd just run a marathon. The train ride home was quieter, less crowded, and he spent it staring at nothing, too tired to process anything else. Mia was at the kitchen table when he got home doing homework. She looked up. How was it? Intense, long, weird. Did people like you? Some did, some didn't. One guy definitely hates me. Mia wrinkled her nose. Well, he's stupid then. Adrian laughed, pulled her into a hug. Thanks, kid. I needed that. The next 2 weeks were trial by fire. Adrian spent his days learning systems, reading reports, shadowing his team, and trying not to drown. He discovered that Gerald wasn't just resistant to his leadership, he was actively working against him. Questions Adrian asked in meetings were dismissed. Suggestions he made were explained away as naive. Reports he requested mysteriously took days to arrive. But Adrian had spent years being underestimated, and he knew how to work around people who wanted him to fail. He started building relationships with the rest of the team, one-on-one conversations where he actually listened to their frustrations and concerns. He spent time touring facilities, walking through warehouses and manufacturing floors, talking to the people who actually did the work. And he found problems, lots of them. The safety equipment at the Newark facility was 15 years out of date. The fire suppression system at the Chicago warehouse had failed its last 3 inspections, and nobody had followed up. There were injury reports that had been filed but never investigated, maintenance requests that had been ignored for months. Adrian started documenting everything. He built spreadsheets tracking issues by location, severity, and cost to fix. He prioritized based on actual risk, not politics. And when he presented his findings at the department meeting 2 weeks in, even Gerald had trouble arguing with the data. This is thorough work, Karen said, looking at the report Adrian had distributed. I had no idea the Newark situation was this bad. It's bad, Adrian said, and it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. We need to address it now. Gerald leaned back in his chair. This level of remediation would require significant budget allocation. Finance isn't going to approve that without extensive justification. Then we'll provide the justification. Karen, can you pull the injury statistics for Newark for the past 2 years? Sure, but... And Tom, I need the compliance violation history. Every citation, every warning, everything. Tom nodded, already taking notes. Adrian could see Gerald's jaw tightening. We're not going to finance with a request, Adrian continued. We're going with a case. Here are the problems. Here's what it's costing us in violations and risk exposure, and here's what it'll cost to fix it. They can say yes, or they can explain why they're comfortable with potential deaths on their books. The room was quiet. Then Karen spoke. I'll have those numbers to you by tomorrow morning. After the meeting, Adrian was heading back to his office when Gerald caught up with him in the hallway. Clever, Gerald said. Rally the team, build momentum, make me look like the obstructionist. Is that the play? There's no play, Gerald. There's just work that needs to be done. You really think you're going to last here? You're Elena's pet project. Everyone knows it. The second you stop being useful, you're gone. Adrian stopped walking, turned to face him. Maybe. But while I'm here, I'm going to do the job right. You can help with that, or you can keep trying to undermine me. But I promise you, one of those options is going to work out a lot better for you than the other." He walked away before Gerald could respond, heart pounding but stride steady. That night, Elena called him. His cell, after 9, which felt oddly personal. "I heard about the department meeting today," she said, "and your proposal for Newark. News travels fast. Rebecca keeps me informed. Adrian, you're doing good work. Better than I expected, honestly." Gerald doesn't think so. Gerald is a problem I should have dealt with months ago. He's competent, but he's territorial, and he can't handle anyone challenging his authority. I'll talk to him. Don't. Adrian surprised himself with the firmness in his voice. "I need to handle this myself. If you intervene, it just proves I can't manage my own team." There was a pause. "You're right. Okay, but if he crosses a line, you tell me." "I will." "How's Mia adjusting? This has to be a big change for her, too." The question caught Adrian off guard. "She's good. Happy I'm home more. Still thinks the tie looks weird." Elena laughed. "Smart kid. Listen, about Wednesday's dinner, it's mostly just the senior team, but it's important for you to be there. People are still sizing you up." "I know. I'll be there." "Good. And Adrian, don't let Gerald get in your head. You earned this position. Keep proving it." The dinner was at a restaurant Adrian couldn't have afforded to eat at in his previous life. The kind of place where the menu didn't list prices and the waiters moved like dancers. He showed up in the only blazer he owned, feeling underdressed the moment he walked in. The senior leadership team was already there, seated at a long table. Elena at the head, flanked by her CFO and COO, with various VPs and directors filling in the rest of the seats. Adrian recognized a few faces from company meetings, but most were strangers. The seat next to Elena was conspicuously empty. "Adrian," Elena said, gesturing to the chair. "Join us." He sat, acutely aware that this placement meant something, that everyone was noticing where Elena had put him. The CFO, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Liu, gave him an appraising look. "So you're the famous Adrian Cole," Patricia said. "Elena's been singing your praises." "I'm just trying to do my job." "Humble. I like that." Patricia sipped her wine. "Though I have to say your proposal for Newark is ambitious. That's a $2 million remediation project. It's also a $2 million lawsuit if someone dies because we ignored the problem." "Fair point." Patricia exchanged a glance with Elena. "You think like a lawyer." "I think like someone who's seen what happens when maintenance gets ignored. Someone always pays the price, usually the people at the bottom." The conversation moved on, flowing around him in waves. These people spoke a language Adrian was still learning, full of quarterly projections and market positioning and strategic initiatives. He stayed quiet mostly, listening, trying to map the dynamics. Who deferred to whom? Who challenged Elena and who stayed silent? Who seemed genuinely invested in the company's success and who was just protecting their territory? The COO, a man named Richard Vaughn, was Elena's uncle. Adrian hadn't known that until Richard made some comment about keeping it in the family, and Elena's expression went carefully neutral. There was history there, tension barely concealed. "Adrian," Richard said, his tone genial, but with an edge underneath. "Elena tells me you worked in hospitality before joining us. That must be quite a transition." "It is. I imagine it's challenging, learning an entirely new industry at this level. Most directors have years of experience to draw from." "They do. I'm learning fast." Of course. It's just unusual, isn't it? To promote someone so quickly, with so little relevant background. Makes some people wonder about the decision-making process." The table went quiet. Elena set down her fork, her voice cool. "Richard, if you have concerns about my hiring decisions, you're welcome to raise them in an appropriate forum. A dinner, isn't it?" "No concerns, just observations. We all want what's best for the company." "Then I'm sure you'll support Adrian's work to improve our safety standards. Unless you'd prefer we continue ignoring critical infrastructure failures." Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Not at all. I'm sure Adrian is very capable." The rest of the dinner was strained. Adrian barely tasted his food, too busy navigating the subtext of every conversation. By the time they finished, he felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical work. Outside, while people were saying their goodbyes and calling cars, Elena pulled him aside. I'm sorry about Richard. He's been making noise about my leadership since I took over. He's your uncle. That's complicated. He thinks he should have gotten the CEO position when my father died. He's never forgiven me for being named instead. Elena's expression was tight. And now he's using you to make his point, that I'm impulsive, that I make emotional decisions. Am I? An emotional decision? No, you're a calculated risk that's paying off. But he doesn't see it that way. Adrian watched the other executives dispersing, getting into expensive cars. This is a different kind of fight than I'm used to. Welcome to corporate leadership. The battles don't leave bruises you can see. Yeah, well, I'll take a visible bruise over this any day. Elena smiled. You'll learn. And Adrian? Thanks for standing your ground tonight. A lot of people would have tried to backtrack or defend themselves. You just stated facts. Didn't seem worth arguing about. Everything's worth arguing about in this world. You just have to pick which fights matter. She left, and Adrian caught a cab home, sitting in silence as the city blurred past. He thought about Gerald and Richard and all the other people who saw him as proof of Elena's poor judgment. He thought about Mia asking if people liked him, and how he'd said some did and some didn't, as if that was the whole story. The truth was more complicated. Some people doubted him. Some people resented him. And some people, like Elena, believed in him for reasons he still didn't fully understand. His phone buzzed. A text from Karen, FYI. Gerald went to finance this morning to block your Newark proposal. I thought you should know. Adrian stared at the message, anger simmering. Then he typed, Thanks for the heads up. I'll handle it. The next morning, Adrian went straight to Gerald's office. We need to talk. Gerald looked up from his computer, expression neutral. About you trying to sabotage my proposal behind my back. I didn't sabotage anything. I raised legitimate concerns with finance about budget allocation and timeline feasibility, without talking to me first, without giving me a chance to address those concerns. Adrian closed the door. Look, Gerald, I get it. You wanted this job. You think I don't deserve it. Fine. But this isn't about you and me. This is about people's safety. And if you're so focused on undermining me that you're willing to put workers at risk, then you're the one who doesn't belong here. Gerald stood, and Adrian realized he was a good 3 inches taller, probably 50 pounds heavier. Intimidation tactic. Adrian didn't move. You have no idea how this company works, Gerald said, voice low. You think you can waltz in here with your working-class hero routine and everyone's going to fall in line? You're a novelty, Elena's charity case, and when she gets bored or realizes her mistake, you'll be gone, and the rest of us will still be here cleaning up your mess. Maybe. But until then, I'm your boss, and you're going to do your job, which means supporting department initiatives, not sabotaging them. We clear? They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Gerald smiled, cold and mean. Crystal clear, boss. Adrian left before he could say something he'd regret, his hands shaking with suppressed adrenaline. He'd never been good at corporate politics, at managing conflict without it getting physical or loud. But he was learning. He was adapting. He had to. He went to finance himself, met with Patricia directly, and walked her through the Newark numbers in detail. By the end of the meeting, she'd approved the budget allocation, noting that Gerald's concerns had been overstated and incomplete. It was a win, a real one. But Adrian knew it had cost him. Gerald wasn't the type to forget being outmaneuvered. That night, he took Mia out for pizza to celebrate, even though she had no idea what he was celebrating. You seem happy, she said, picking pepperoni off her slice. Good day at work. Is the mean guy still being mean? Yeah, but I won anyway. Mia grinned. Good, you should always win. Good. Doesn't work that way, kiddo. Sometimes you lose. You just have to make sure you lose the right fights. That doesn't make sense. It will when you're older. But watching Mia eat her pizza, chattering about school drama and her friend's birthday party, Adrian realized he was starting to understand Elena's world a little better. Every decision was calculated. Every relationship was strategic. And the real battles weren't about who was right, but who had the power to make their version of right stick. He just hoped he could learn fast enough to survive it. 3 months into the job, Adrian was in a facility manager's office in Newark when his phone rang with Elena's name on the screen. He almost didn't answer. He was in the middle of walking through the remediation plan with the local team, pointing out ventilation issues that had been ignored for years, but something made him pick up. "I need you back at headquarters," Elena said without preamble. "Now. I'm in Newark. I won't be back until—" "Now, Adrian, there's a situation." The line went dead. Adrian looked at Karen, who'd come with him for the site visit, and saw his own confusion reflected in her face. "Everything okay?" she asked. "I don't know. I have to go back." He turned to the facility manager. "We'll continue this tomorrow. In the meantime, get quotes on the ventilation upgrades. I want them on my desk by end of week." The drive back to the city took 2 hours in traffic, and Adrian spent most of it trying to figure out what could be urgent enough to pull him off a critical site visit. When he finally made it to headquarters, Rebecca was waiting in the lobby. "Conference room 7, Ms. Vaughn, Richard Vaughn, Patricia Liu, and legal counsel are already there." "What's this about?" "She'll explain." The conference room was tense when Adrian walked in. Elena sat at the head of the table, her expression carved from ice. Richard was across from her, looking smug. Patricia had her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. And a man Adrian didn't recognize, 50s, expensive suit, lawyer written all over him, sat next to Richard taking notes. "Adrian," "Oh," Elena said. "Close the door." He did, taking the empty seat next to Elena. She slid a folder across the table to him. "Gerald Moss filed a formal complaint this morning with HR and the board. He's alleging that you're unqualified for your position, that you've been making reckless decisions without proper oversight, and that your appointment represents a fundamental failure of corporate governance. He's also suggesting that your relationship with me is inappropriate, and that I violated company policy by hiring you." Adrian felt like he'd been punched. That's insane. There's no relationship, and my decisions have been backed up by data every single time." "We know that," Patricia said, not looking up from her laptop. "But Gerald's built a compelling case on paper. He's documented every meeting where you've contradicted him, every decision he disagreed with, every time you've bypassed normal channels. And he's framed it as inexperience and recklessness, rather than effective leadership." Richard leaned back in his chair. "I have to say, Elena, I warned you about this. Promoting someone with no corporate background into a senior leadership role was always going to invite scrutiny. You warned me about a lot of things, Richard, most of them designed to undermine my authority. I'm trying to protect the company." "You're trying to protect your own position." Elena's voice was sharp enough to cut. "Let's not pretend this is about Adrian. Gerald reports to Adrian, but he's been having weekly lunches with you for the past 2 months. You think I don't know what this is?" Richard's expression didn't change, but Adrian saw something flicker in his eyes. Calculation. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've been positioning yourself as an alternative to my leadership since the day I took over, and now you're using Gerald's complaint as ammunition." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Ms. Vaughn, personal dynamics aside, the complaint itself presents a real problem. The board is required to investigate any formal allegations of governance violations. That means an external review of Mr. Cole's appointment, his performance, and the decision-making process that led to his hiring." "How long will that take?" Adrian asked. 4 to 6 weeks, typically. "During that time, we'd recommend Mr. Cole step back from active decision-making to avoid any appearance of impropriety." "Absolutely not," Elena said. "Adrian's in the middle of critical infrastructure projects. Newark alone. Can be overseen by Gerald Moss in the interim," Richard said smoothly. "He's more than qualified, and it would demonstrate our commitment to proper procedure." Adrian felt rage building in his chest, hot and tight. This was a setup. Gerald had been documenting everything, building his case, waiting for the right moment. And Richard had been coaching him, giving him political cover, turning a personal grudge into a corporate crisis. "I'll step back," Adrian said quietly. Elena turned to him, eyes flashing. "No, we're not giving them this." "Elena, if I don't, it looks like you're protecting me, like they're right about our relationship being inappropriate." Adrian met her gaze. "I step back, I cooperate fully with the investigation, and I let my work speak for itself. When they're done, they'll see that Gerald's complaint is personal, not legitimate. And if they don't? If Richard stacked the investigation committee and they find in Gerald's favor? Then I'm gone anyway, At least this way we control the narrative. The lawyer nodded approvingly. That's the right approach, Mr. Cole. Cooperation demonstrates confidence in your record. Richard was watching Adrian with undisguised interest. Very gracious of you, though I have to wonder if your record is so strong, why you'd be worried about an investigation. I'm not worried about the investigation. I'm worried about the 4 to 6 weeks of projects being stalled while you and Gerald play politics. Then perhaps you should have considered that before accepting a position you weren't qualified for. Adrian started to stand, and Elena's hand landed on his arm, firm and grounding. Richard, unless you have something productive to contribute, you can leave. This is a board matter, Elena. I have every right to... You have a right to file formal complaints through proper channels. You don't have a right to sit in my conference room and take shots at my staff. So either contribute something useful or get out. Richard stood slowly, adjusting his jacket. This isn't over. It never is with you. He left, the lawyer trailing after him. Patricia closed her laptop and looked between Elena and Adrian. For what it's worth, I think Gerald's complaint is politically motivated garbage, Patricia said. But the board's going to take it seriously because Richard's making noise, so we need to be smart about this. Define smart, Adrian said. You step back from active management like you said, but you spend the next 6 weeks documenting everything you've accomplished. Every project, every cost saving, every safety improvement. We build a case that's so airtight that when the investigation concludes, the only possible finding is that you've been an asset to this company. I can do that. Good. I'll work with Rebecca to compile the data. Elena, you need to stay out of this as much as possible. Any appearance of interference will be used against both of you. After Patricia left, Adrian and Elena sat in silence for a long moment. Then Elena dropped her head into her hands. I should fire him, she said, voice muffled. Gerald, Richard, all of them, clean house. You can't. It would look like retaliation. I don't care how it looks. Yes, you do. That's the whole problem. Adrian stood, walking to the windows. The city stretched out below, indifferent to all of this. Elena, they're not wrong about one thing. I am underqualified on paper, and your decision to hire me was risky. It was the right decision. Maybe. But that doesn't change the fact that I've made enemies, and those enemies are now going after you through me. Elena stood, came to stand beside him. You think I didn't know that would happen? Adrian, I've been dealing with Richard and people like him my entire career. They question every decision I make because I'm young and I'm a woman and I didn't climb the ladder the way they think I should have. Hiring you was risky, yes, but it was also necessary. This company was drowning in complacency and old boy politics. You changed that. I'm not sure it was worth this. It was worth it to me. Her voice had gone quiet, almost vulnerable. Adrian looked at her and saw past the CEO armor to the woman underneath, exhausted, frustrated, fighting battles on every front. He thought about that night in her bathroom, her hand gripping his, the fear in her eyes. He thought about her walking into that boardroom the next morning and winning anyway. We'll get through this, he said. You've survived worse. Have I? Elena smiled, bitter. Sometimes I'm not sure anymore. Sometimes I think my father made a mistake naming me his successor. That Richard should have gotten the company, and I should have just walked away. You don't believe that. Don't I? Look at this mess. Look at what my decisions have cost. You're a good person, Adrian. You were doing fine before I dragged you into this world. And now you're caught in the middle of a power struggle that has nothing to do with you. Elena. Adrian waited until she looked at him. I made the choice to take this job. Nobody forced me. And yeah, it's been hard, and yeah, I've made enemies. But I've also done good work, real work that matters. So don't stand there and tell me you made a mistake because you didn't. You gave me a chance nobody else would have. I'm not going to waste it. Something shifted in her expression. Relief maybe, or gratitude. I don't deserve your loyalty. Probably not, but you have it anyway. She laughed, short and surprised. Then she straightened, the armor sliding back into place. Okay, so here's what happens next. You document everything for Patricia. I stay out of it publicly, and when this investigation concludes, we shove the results down Richard's throat. Sounds like a plan. And Adrian, thank you for not making this harder than it already is. He left her office feeling wrung out and angry and strangely determined. Gerald wanted a fight, and Richard wanted ammunition. Fine. They could have both. But Adrian was going to make damn sure they lost. The next 6 weeks were torture. Adrian came to the office every day but wasn't allowed to make decisions or attend operational meetings. He spent his time writing reports, compiling data, and watching from the sidelines as Gerald took over his projects. The Newark remediation was delayed. The safety training program Adrian had developed was put on hold. And Gerald made sure everyone knew that operations were returning to normal under his leadership. Karen called him one afternoon, voice tight with frustration. "He's killing everything you built. The Chicago warehouse inspection you scheduled? Canceled. The emergency response protocols? Under review, which means shelved." "I know. So why aren't you fighting back?" "Because fighting back right now makes it look like Gerald's right, that I'm reckless and impulsive." Adrian closed his eyes. "I have to let the process play out." "That's crap and you know it." "Maybe, but it's the game we're playing." He tried to explain it to Mia one night over dinner when she asked why he seemed so stressed. "There's this guy at work who doesn't like me," Adrian said carefully. "And he's trying to get me fired." "Why?" "Because he wanted my job, and he thinks I don't deserve it." Mia frowned, pushing pasta around her plate. "Does Elena think you deserve it?" "Yeah." "Then who cares what he thinks?" "It's more complicated than that, kiddo." "Adults make everything complicated." Mia looked at him seriously. "You're good at your job, right? Like, you actually help people?" "I try to." "Then you'll be fine. Good people always win." Adrian wished he could believe that, but he'd seen enough of the world to know that good people lost all the time, and the only thing that mattered was who had more power when the dust settled. The investigation committee was appointed 3 weeks in. 5 board members, including one of Richard's allies, which Elena called Patricia about immediately. "They're stacking it," Adrian heard Elena say through the closed door of her office. He was walking past, carrying another file to add to his ever-growing documentation pile. "Thomas Wexler is Richard's lapdog. He'll vote however Richard tells him to." He couldn't hear Patricia's response, but Elena's next words were sharp and frustrated. "I know I can't interfere, I know, but watching this play out while my hands are tied is—" A pause. Yes, I understand. We'll let the process work." Adrian kept walking. The anger he'd felt in the beginning had faded into something duller, wearier. He was tired of fighting, tired of proving himself, tired of watching people like Gerald and Richard manipulate systems to protect their own interests while pretending it was about principle. But he kept documenting, kept building his case. Because what else was there to do? The interview with the investigation committee happened 5 weeks in. Adrian sat across from 5 board members in a conference room that felt designed for intimidation. Long table, harsh lighting, nowhere to hide. Thomas Wexler led the questioning, his tone polite but with an edge underneath. "Mr. Cole, can you explain your qualifications for the Director of Operations and Safety position?" Adrian had practiced this answer. "I have 15 years of experience in facility maintenance and operations, including 3 years managing a maintenance team at the Meridian Hotel. I was also a certified EMT for 6 months, which gave me training in emergency response and crisis management. But no corporate experience, no background in manufacturing or industrial safety regulations." "That's correct. I learned those aspects on the job." "And you believe that learning on the job is appropriate for a senior leadership role?" "I believe that some skills can be taught and some can't. Regulatory knowledge can be taught. The ability to see problems, prioritize effectively, and make decisions under pressure, those are harder to develop. I brought the second set. I learned the first." Thomas made a note. "Let's talk about your relationship with Ms. Vaughn. You met her in a personal capacity before being hired, correct?" "I met her the night she had a severe allergic reaction. I helped her get medical attention. And then she offered you this position. Some might say that creates a conflict of interest. Some might. But my hiring was based on my skills, not personal favor. And my performance since then has demonstrated that Ms. Vaughn's judgment was sound." "That's a matter of interpretation, isn't it? Mr. Moss has documented numerous instances where your decisions were questioned by more experienced staff." Adrian felt heat rise in his chest. "Mr. Moss has documented numerous instances where I contradicted him. That's not the same thing as making bad decisions. In fact, if you review the outcomes of those decisions, you'll find that most of them resulted in cost savings, improved safety metrics, or both." Another board member spoke up, a woman named Claire Hendricks. Mr. Cole, I've reviewed your work on the Newark facility. The remediation plan was thorough and the budget justification was solid. Can you walk us through your decision-making process there? Adrian did, explaining how he'd identified the problems, consulted with experts, prioritized based on risk, and built a case for immediate action. Claire asked follow-up questions, clearly actually listening, and by the end of his explanation, even Thomas looked less hostile. They questioned him for 2 hours, covering everything from specific project decisions to his management style to his relationship with Elena. Adrian answered honestly, didn't try to sugarcoat his inexperience, and made sure they understood that while he might have been an unconventional choice, he'd been the right choice. When it was over, he felt hollowed out and uncertain. He had no idea which way they'd vote. Elena found him in his office afterward, staring at nothing. How'd it go? Hard to tell. Thomas definitely has it out for me. Claire seemed fair. The others were hard to read. Elena sat in the chair across from his desk. Patricia talked to Claire yesterday. Off the record, she's impressed with your work, so that's 1 vote. I need 3. I know. They sat in silence. Then Elena said, if this goes badly, if they recommend termination, I'm going to fight it. Elena, you can't. It'll just make things worse. I don't care. This entire process is political theater, and I'm not going to let Richard win. Even if fighting costs you more than it costs him? She met his eyes. Yes. Adrian shook his head. You're stubborn as hell, you know that? I've been told. Elena's expression softened. Adrian, I need you to understand something. What you've done here, the changes you've made, it matters. Not just to the company, but to me. You remind me why I'm fighting so hard to keep this place. Because there are still people who care about doing the right thing, not just protecting their turf. I'm not some noble crusader. I'm just a guy trying not to screw up. That's exactly what makes you valuable. You don't have an agenda beyond doing your job well. She stood. Whatever happens, I want you to know that I don't regret hiring you, not for a second. After she left, Adrian sat in his office until the sun went down and the building grew quiet. He thought about Mia's faith that good people always won. He thought about Elena's determination to fight battles she might not be able to win. He thought about Gerald's smug expression and Richard's cold calculation and all the ways this could end badly. And he thought about the workers in Newark who'd been breathing contaminated air for years because nobody had cared enough to fix it. About the safety improvements that had already saved 3 people from serious injury, according to the incident reports. About Karen telling him he'd built something real, something that mattered. Maybe that had to be enough. Maybe winning and losing weren't the only measures that counted. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Committee meets tomorrow to vote. Thought you should know. Claire Hendricks. Adrian stared at the message. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours until he knew whether he still had a job or whether Gerald had won. He texted back, "Thank you for telling me." Then he went home to Mia, who was doing homework at the kitchen table and barely looked up when he walked in. "You're late," she said. "Yeah, long day. You want me to heat up the lasagna?" "Sure, kiddo, thanks." While she microwaved leftovers, Adrian sat at the table and watched her move through the small kitchen with easy competence. 10 years old and already learning to take care of herself because her dad was too busy fighting corporate battles. It made him feel guilty and proud in equal measure. "Dad?" Mia set a plate in front of him. "Did you find out about your job?" "Not yet. Tomorrow." "You're going to be fine." "How do you know?" She rolled her eyes. "Because you're you. You don't give up on things. Sometimes giving up is smart." "Yeah, but you don't do smart things. You do right things. There's a difference." Adrian pulled her into a hug, feeling her small frame solid against him. "When'd you get so wise?" "I was born this way. You just weren't paying attention." He laughed, and it felt good, releasing some of the tension he'd been carrying. Whatever happened tomorrow, he had this. His daughter, this small apartment, this life they'd built together. That was real. The rest was just noise. But that night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, Adrian couldn't quiet his mind. He kept running through the interview, analyzing every question, every response, trying to figure out which way the vote would go. 3 out of 5. He needed 3 votes to survive this. His phone buzzed at 2 in the morning, Elena's name on the screen. "You awake?" she asked when he answered. Yeah. I can't sleep. Keep thinking about tomorrow. Me too. Adrian, if they vote to terminate, I'm prepared to override it. CEO prerogative. And then the board votes to remove you, and Richard gets exactly what he wants. Maybe. But I'm not throwing you under the bus to save my own position. Even if it's the smart play? I told you before, I don't always do the smart thing. She paused. You're a good person, Adrian Cole. This company needs more people like you. I need more people like you. So if it comes down to choosing between political survival and doing what's right, I'm choosing right. Elena, I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Now try to get some sleep. She hung up before he could argue. Adrian set his phone down and closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. He just lay there in the dark, thinking about choices and consequences and the strange way his life had become tangled up with this woman he'd met on the worst night of her life. Tomorrow, they'd both find out if the risk had been worth it. The committee's decision came at 3 in the afternoon. Adrian was in his office pretending to work on documentation he'd already finished twice when Rebecca appeared in his doorway. They've reached a verdict, conference room 7 in 10 minutes. Adrian's stomach dropped. Do you know which way it went? Ms. Vaughn doesn't know either. They kept it sealed. Rebecca's expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. She'll meet you there. The walk to the conference room felt like walking to an execution. Adrian's hands were sweating, his heart hammering against his ribs. He passed Karen in the hallway, and she gave him a tight, worried smile. News had clearly spread. Everyone was waiting to see if the maintenance guy who'd somehow become a director would survive the political hit job. Elena was already in the conference room when Adrian arrived, standing by the windows with her arms crossed, posture rigid. She turned when he entered. Whatever happens, she said quietly, we handle it together. Elena, if they vote against me, you let it go. You don't fight the board on this. We'll see. Before Adrian could argue, the door opened and the investigation committee filed in. Claire Hendricks first, then Thomas Wexler, and the 3 other board members whose names Adrian could barely remember through the haze of anxiety. They took their seats across the table, and Claire set a folder down in front of her. Thank you both for coming, Claire said. We've completed our review of Mr. Cole's appointment and performance. I'll get straight to the findings. Adrian forced himself to breathe. Elena's hand found his under the table, a brief squeeze that felt like an anchor. The committee reviewed Mr. Cole's qualifications, his performance metrics over the past 5 months, and the circumstances of his hiring. We interviewed Mr. Moss, other department staff, and reviewed financial and operational data related to Mr. Cole's projects. Claire opened the folder. Our findings are as follows. First, while Mr. Cole's appointment was unconventional, it was within Ms. Vaughn's authority as CEO to make such a hiring decision. Second, Mr. Cole's performance has been objectively strong. The Newark facility remediation plan alone is projected to save the company $3 million in regulatory fines and litigation risk. Third, the allegations that Mr. Cole's relationship with Ms. Vaughn represents a conflict of interest are unsupported by evidence. Their interaction has been strictly professional. Thomas Wexler shifted in his seat, looking like he'd bitten into something sour. Adrian felt hope starting to build in his chest, but he didn't let himself believe it yet. However, Claire continued, the committee did identify areas of concern. Mr. Cole's management style has created friction within his department. His tendency to bypass established protocols, while sometimes effective, has alienated senior staff, and his rapid promotion has created perception problems both internally and externally. Perception isn't the same as reality, Elena said sharply. No, but perception matters in corporate governance, which brings us to our recommendation. Claire looked directly at Adrian. The committee votes 3-2 to retain Mr. Cole in his current position with the following conditions. First, he completes a leadership development program focused on corporate management practices. Second, he works with an executive coach for the next 6 months to address interpersonal dynamics within his team. And third, his performance undergoes formal review again in 1 year. Adrian felt like he'd been holding his breath for 6 weeks and could finally exhale. He'd won. Not cleanly, not without conditions, but he'd won. I assume Thomas was one of the dissenting votes, Elena said. Thomas smiled coldly. I maintain that Mr. Cole's appointment was premature, and that this company would be better served by promoting from within. But I respect the committee's decision. How gracious of you, Elena said, not bothering to hide her contempt. Is there anything else? Just one thing. Claire's expression softened slightly. Mr. Cole, off the record, I was skeptical when I started this review. I thought you were a diversity hire or a pet project, but your work speaks for itself. You've identified problems that have been ignored for years and you've solved them efficiently. So my advice is to keep doing what you're doing, but learn to do it in a way that doesn't make enemies of everyone who's been here longer than you. I can do that, Adrian said, finding his voice. Good. Then we're done here. The committee filed out. Thomas lingered for a moment, looking like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it and left. When the door closed, Elena turned to Adrian. You did it. We did it. Adrian felt shaky, relief washing over him in waves. Though I'm pretty sure Thomas is going to make my life hell for the next year. Let him try. He's 1 vote out of 12 on the board, and Claire just made it clear she's on your side. Elena's expression shifted, something fierce and proud replacing the tension. Adrian, do you understand what this means? They investigated you for 6 weeks. Richard threw everything he had at you, and you still won. That's not luck. That's proof you belong here. I won on a 3-2 vote. That's not exactly a landslide. It's a win. Take it. Adrian wanted to. He wanted to feel triumphant, vindicated, all the things you were supposed to feel when you survived an attack like this. But mostly, he just felt tired. I need to talk to Gerald, he said. Why? He tried to destroy you. Because he still works for me, and if I don't address this now, it's just going to get worse. Elena studied him for a moment. You're a better person than I am. I doubt that. I'd fire him today. Hell, I'd have fired him weeks ago. And then Richard would use it as proof that you're vindictive and can't handle dissent. No, this ends with Gerald and me finding a way to work together, or with him deciding to leave on his own. Good luck with that. Adrian found Gerald in his office an hour later. The man was at his computer, but Adrian could tell from his posture that he'd been expecting this conversation. There was a resignation in the way Gerald sat, the way he didn't look up when Adrian closed the door. I assume you've heard the committee's decision, Adrian said. I have. So here's where we are. You tried to get me fired, and you failed. You could have come to me directly with your concerns, tried to work things out professionally, but instead you went behind my back and tried to destroy my career. That makes you either a coward or a political operative, and I'm trying to figure out which. Gerald finally looked up. You think this is over? You won by 1 vote, Cole. 1 vote. Half the board thinks you're unqualified. Your own team is divided on whether you should be here, and Elena's protection only goes so far. Eventually, you're going to make a mistake big enough that even she can't save you. Maybe, but until then, you work for me. So you have a choice. You can keep fighting me, keep undermining every decision I make, and we can both be miserable for however long this lasts. Or you can do your actual job, which you're apparently very good at when you're not too busy plotting against people. You're asking me to just accept this? To pretend like nothing happened? I'm asking you to be professional. I'm asking you to put the company ahead of your ego. Adrian sat down across from Gerald's desk. Look, I get it. You wanted this job. You've been here for 15 years, you've put in the work, and then some guy with no corporate experience swoops in and takes what you think should be yours. That's not fair. I'm not going to pretend it is. But I didn't take anything from you. Elena made a choice based on what she thought the company needed. And maybe she was wrong. Maybe I'll crash and burn. But fighting me doesn't change anything except making both our lives harder. Gerald leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. You want me to thank you for not firing me? I want you to stop sabotaging me. Everything else is negotiable. They sat in silence for a long moment. Adrian could see Gerald processing, weighing his options, trying to figure out what game was being played here. The Newark project, Gerald said finally. You're going to need someone senior to oversee implementation. I know the facility. I know the compliance requirements. If you're willing to give me operational control on that, I'll make sure it gets done right. It was an olive branch, sort of. A transactional one, maybe, but still an attempt at détente. Adrian knew it could be a trap. Gerald could sabotage the project and blame him for poor oversight. But he also knew that they couldn't keep fighting like this. Something had to give. Operational control, with weekly check-ins directly with me. You flag any problems immediately, no sitting on issues to make me look bad later. And if I see any sign that you're using this as an opportunity to undermine the project, I pull you off, and you're back to standard compliance reviews. Deal? Gerald's expression didn't soften, but something shifted. Deal. Good. Send me a project timeline by end of week. I'm down. Adrian left Gerald's office feeling like he'd just negotiated a ceasefire in a war that wasn't actually over, just paused. But it was something, a step toward maybe being able to function without constantly watching his back. Karen was waiting by his office when he returned. You talked to Gerald? Yeah. And? And we have a temporary truce. Whether it holds depends on whether he actually wants to move forward or if he's just regrouping. Karen nodded slowly. For what it's worth, most of the team is glad you're staying. Gerald had his supporters, but a lot of people were worried he'd undo all the progress we've made. Thanks, Karen. That means a lot. Just don't make me regret believing in you, okay? She left, and Adrian finally let himself sit down and process what had just happened. He'd survived. Against odds that should have crushed him, he'd survived. The investigation, Richard's machinations, Gerald's betrayal, none of it had been enough to destroy him. But he also knew this was just one battle. Richard hadn't gotten what he wanted, which meant he'd keep pushing. Gerald might honor their agreement or might be planning his next move. And Elena had spent political capital defending him, capital she might need later for fights that mattered more. His phone rang. Mia's school. Mr. Cole? This is Principal Martinez. I'm calling because Mia got into an altercation today with another student. Adrian's stomach sank. Is she okay? She's fine. No one was hurt. But she did push another girl during recess, and that's not acceptable behavior. I need you to come pick her up. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator, texting Elena as he went. Family emergency. Have to leave early. Her response came immediately. Take care of your daughter. We'll celebrate later. The school was a 40-minute train ride, and Adrian spent the whole trip trying to figure out what could have happened. Mia wasn't violent. She was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of kid who avoided conflict. For her to push someone meant something serious had gone down. Principal Martinez met him in the main office, Mia sitting on a bench looking small and defiant at the same time. There was another girl there too, with her mother, the girl's face red and puffy like she'd been crying. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. Principal Martinez gestured to her office. Let's talk about what happened. Inside, with Mia sitting beside him, Adrian listened as the principal explained. The other girl, Stephanie, had apparently been making comments about Mia's clothes and the fact that they didn't have much money. She'd been doing it for weeks, according to witnesses. But today she'd said something about Mia's dad being just a janitor, and that's when Mia had snapped and pushed her. Is that true? Adrian asked Mia quietly. She wouldn't shut up, Mia said, voice tight. She kept saying mean things about you, about us. And when she called you a janitor like it was something bad, I got mad. Adrian felt something crack in his chest. His daughter, defending him against bullies, getting in trouble because some kid had made fun of what he did for a living. Except he wasn't even doing that anymore. He had an office and a title and a salary that could buy Mia new clothes if he'd been paying attention enough to notice she needed them. Mia, you can't put your hands on people no matter what they say, Adrian said. That's not how we solve problems. But she was being mean, I know. But pushing her didn't fix that. It just got you in trouble. Both girls will be suspended for the rest of the week, Principal Martinez said. Mia for the physical altercation, Stephanie for bullying. We have a zero-tolerance policy for both. Adrian nodded, numb. I understand. Outside in the parking lot, where they waited for a cab, Mia started crying. Not loud, just quiet tears running down her face. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to get in trouble. I just wanted her to stop saying those things about you. Adrian pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. You don't have to defend me, kiddo. I can handle people talking. But she made it sound like you're not important, like you don't matter because you don't have a fancy job. And that's not true. You matter to me. I know I do. And you matter to me. More than any job, more than anything. Adrian pulled back, wiping her tears. But Mia, I need you to understand something. There's nothing wrong with being a janitor or working maintenance or any other job. Those are honest jobs that keep the world running. And the people who do them are just as important as CEOs or lawyers or anyone else. Then why did she say it like it was bad? Because some people judge others based on what they do instead of who they are. And those people are small and scared and they don't matter. You know who I am, right? You know I work hard and I try to do right by you? Mia nodded. Then that's all that counts. Not what some kid at school thinks about where I work or how much money we have. They took the cab home, and Adrian made dinner while Mia did homework at the kitchen table. They didn't talk much, both of them processing the day in their own ways. But after Mia went to bed, Adrian sat alone in the living room and let himself feel the full weight of everything. His daughter had gotten suspended defending his honor. Gerald had tried to destroy his career. Elena had put her own position at risk to protect him. And he was supposed to somehow navigate all of this while learning a job he still wasn't sure he was qualified for. His phone buzzed. Elena. How's Mia? Suspended for 3 days. Got in a fight defending me against a bully who said I was just a janitor. Jesus, is she okay? Yeah, shaken up, but okay. Adrian closed his eyes. Elena, I don't know if I can do this. This job, this life. It's affecting my kid. She's getting in fights because of choices I made. Kids get in fights, Adrian. That's not on you, isn't it? If I'd stayed at the hotel, if I'd kept my head down and just accepted that maintenance was as far as I could go, Mia wouldn't be getting bullied about my job. If you'd stayed at the hotel, you'd be miserable and broke, and Mia would still find something to fight about because that's what kids do. Don't make this about your choices. You gave her a better life. Did I? Or did I just trade one set of problems for another? Elena was quiet for a moment. You want to know what I think? I think you're exhausted and you had a hard day and you're catastrophizing. Tomorrow, you're going to wake up and remember that you won today, that you survived an investigation designed to destroy you and came out the other side intact. And Mia is going to be fine because she has a dad who gives a damn about her. You have a lot of faith in me. Someone has to. You're terrible at having faith in yourself. Adrian laughed despite everything. Fair point. Get some sleep. And Adrian, thank you for not giving up today. I know it was hard. After she hung up, Adrian sat in the dark for a while longer, thinking about faith and survival and the weird path that had led him here. 6 months ago, he'd been invisible, struggling to make rent, watching Mia grow up in an apartment that was too small and a life that was too limited. Now he had a career, financial stability, and enemies in high places actively trying to destroy him. Progress apparently was complicated. The next morning, with Mia suspended and no school to worry about, Adrian took her to the office with him. He set her up in the small conference room next to his office with her homework and her tablet, and she seemed happy enough to have a change of scenery. This is where you work? She asked, looking around at the sleek furniture and the view of the city. Yeah. It's nice. Fancy. It is. Do you like it? Adrian considered the question. Sometimes. It's different from what I'm used to, but I like the work I'm doing. I like feeling like I'm making a difference. Then Stephanie's stupid for saying what she said. Probably, but she's also just a kid who doesn't know any better. Still stupid. Adrian left her to her homework and tried to focus on his own work. The Newark project timeline from Gerald came through by 10, detailed and thorough. Adrian reviewed it, made a few notes, and sent it back with approval. Small steps towards something that might eventually resemble a functional working relationship. At lunch, he took Mia to the cafeteria, and she was fascinated by everything. The salad bar, the made-to-order sandwiches, the espresso machine that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. They sat by the windows eating, and Adrian watched her take it all in, trying to see this world through her eyes. Everyone here is really dressed up, Mia observed. Part of the job. Do you like wearing ties? Not particularly. Then why do you? Because that's what people expect. When you work in an office, you dress a certain way. It's like a uniform. Mia wrinkled her nose. That's dumb. You should just wear what's comfortable. Agreed. But sometimes we do things that aren't comfortable because that's what the situation requires. Like you helping that lady who almost died? Adrian was surprised she remembered. He'd only told her the basic story when explaining his new job. Yeah, kind of like that. Sometimes you do what needs to be done, even when it's hard or scary. Is that why you didn't quit when that mean guy tried to get you fired? Partly. but also because I believe in the work I'm doing and because sometimes you have to fight for things that matter. Mia nodded seriously. Like I fought Stephanie. Not exactly. Your fight made things worse. My fight made things better. That's the difference. They finished lunch and headed back upstairs. Adrian was walking Mia back to the conference room when Elena appeared in the hallway, clearly surprised to see them. Adrian, I didn't know you were bringing… Mia, Adrian supplied. She's suspended from school for 3 days. Mia, this is Ms. Vahan. She's my boss. Elena's expression shifted, something warm replacing the professional mask. Hi, Mia. I've heard a lot about you. Hi. Mia studied Elena with open curiosity. You're the one my dad helped when you were sick. I am. Your dad saved my life, actually. He's good at helping people. That's just what he does. Elena glanced at Adrian, and he could see something in her eyes, recognition, maybe, or understanding. He is. You're lucky to have him. I know. After Mia was settled back in the conference room, Elena pulled Adrian aside. She's great, sharp. She's the best thing in my life. I can tell. Elena paused. Listen, there's something I need to tell you. Richard called an emergency board meeting for next week. He's pushing for a full strategic review of company leadership. Adrian felt his stomach drop. He's coming for you again. He never stopped. The investigation into you was just the opening move. Now he wants to question my overall judgment, my strategic vision, everything. Elena's voice was tight. He's going to argue that the company needs more experienced leadership, that I'm too young, too impulsive, making too many controversial decisions. Like hiring me, among other things. Elena, if I'm a liability to you, you're not. You're proof that my instincts are good, that I can identify talent others miss. Richard wants me to see you as a weakness. I see you as a strength. Even if the board doesn't agree? The board follows whoever makes the most compelling argument, so I need to make my case airtight. She looked at him directly. And I need you to help me do it. How? By showing them what you've accomplished. The Newark project, the safety improvements, the cost savings, all of it. You're my evidence that unconventional thinking produces results. Adrian felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. You're using me as your shield. I'm using you as my proof. There's a difference. Elena's expression softened. I know I'm asking a lot. I know you just survived one investigation, and now I'm throwing you back into the fire. But Adrian, if Richard wins, everything we've built disappears. He'll install his own people, reverse our reforms, and this company will go back to being exactly what it was before, stagnant and slowly dying. And if we fight and lose? Then we lose together, but at least we tried. Adrian thought about Mia in that conference room, doing her homework in his office because she'd defended him against bullies. He thought about Gerald's grudging agreement to work together. He thought about Karen saying most of the team was glad he'd stayed. Okay, he said. Tell me what you need. The next week was a blur of preparation. Adrian compiled every metric, every project outcome, every piece of evidence that his work had made a difference. Patricia helped, pulling financial data that showed cost savings and efficiency improvements. Karen contributed operational reports demonstrating reduced incident rates and improved safety compliance. By the time the board meeting arrived, Adrian had built a case so comprehensive it filled 3 binders and a 40-slide presentation. He'd practiced his remarks until they were burned into his brain, anticipating every possible question or challenge. The morning of the meeting, Elena found him in his office at 6 a.m., both of them too wired to sleep. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. Well, Adrian, whatever happens today, I want you to know something. You changed this company. You changed me. Before I met you, I was so focused on proving myself that I forgot why any of this mattered. You reminded me that it's not about power or legacy or winning. It's about actually helping people, actually making things better. So thank you for that. Elena, you're talking like we've already lost. I'm talking like someone who needs to say this now, in case I don't get another chance. The board meeting was scheduled for 10. Adrian and Elena arrived at 9:30 to set up, arranging their materials and going over their strategy one final time. The board members filed in right at 10, all 12 of them, including Richard, who looked confident and relaxed in a way that made Adrian's teeth clench. Claire Hendricks, who'd been appointed board chair after the investigation, called the meeting to order. We're here today to discuss concerns raised by Richard Vaughn regarding company leadership and strategic direction. Richard, you have the floor. Richard stood, and Adrian had to admit the man was good. He started with compliments, acknowledging Elena's intelligence, her dedication, her passion for the company. Then he pivoted. However, passion without experience can be dangerous. Over the past year, Elena has made several high-risk decisions that, while well-intentioned, have raised serious concerns about her judgment. The hiring of Adrian Cole is one example. A maintenance supervisor with no corporate background promoted to senior leadership is unprecedented. And while the investigation committee cleared him, the fact that such an investigation was necessary speaks to the problems with Elena's decision-making process. He went on, cataloging other decisions Elena had made, acquisitions Richard thought were overpriced, partnerships he considered risky, restructuring that had displaced longtime employees. He made it all sound reckless, impulsive, the actions of someone too young to understand the stakes. "I'm not suggesting we remove Elena from her position," Richard concluded. "I'm suggesting we provide her with additional oversight. Specifically, I'm proposing we create a chief operating officer position, someone with decades of experience who can provide guidance and stability, someone who can help Elena mature into the leader this company needs." The subtext was clear. Richard wanted to be that COO. He wanted authority without accountability, power without Elena being able to check him. When Richard sat down, Claire looked to Elena. "Your response?" Elena stood, and Adrian saw her take a breath, centering herself. This was it. Everything came down to the next 20 minutes. "Richard is right about one thing," Elena began. "I have made high-risk decisions, but he's wrong about the outcomes. Every decision he just criticized has produced measurable results. The acquisitions he called overpriced have increased our market share by 18%. The partnerships he considered risky have opened new revenue streams worth $40 million annually. And the restructuring he mentioned eliminated redundancies that were costing us $12 million a year." She clicked to her first slide, a graph showing company performance under her leadership versus the previous 5 years. "Richard wants to talk about my judgment. Let's talk about results. Revenue is up 23% since I took over. Profit margins have increased by 7 points. Employee satisfaction is at a 5-year high. And our stock price has grown 36%. Those aren't the numbers of a company in crisis. Those are the numbers of a company that's thriving." She continued, methodically dismantling every argument Richard had made. And then she got to Adrian. Richard mentioned Adrian Cole as evidence of poor judgment. Let's examine that claim. Adrian, can you walk the board through your impact? Adrian stood, legs steady despite his nerves. "In the 5 months since I started, my department has implemented safety improvements that have reduced workplace injuries by 42%. We've identified and remediated critical infrastructure failures at 4 facilities, preventing an estimated $6 million in regulatory fines and litigation costs. We've streamlined emergency response protocols, reducing average response time by 30%. And we've done all of this while coming in 8% under budget." He clicked through his slides, showing the data, the timelines, the outcomes. He made sure they understood that this wasn't theoretical. These were real improvements that had protected real people. "Richard is right that my appointment was unconventional," Adrian continued. "But Ms. Vaughn didn't hire me in spite of my background. She hired me because of it. Because I understand how systems fail from the ground up. Because I know what it's like when safety becomes a checkbox instead of a priority. And because I don't have a career's worth of corporate politics teaching me to ignore problems until they become crises." He sat down, and Elena took over again. "The question before this board isn't whether I make risky decisions. It's whether those decisions produce results that justify the risk. And the evidence says they do. Richard wants oversight because he doesn't trust me to lead this company. But I suspect the real issue is that I'm leading it in a direction he doesn't control, and that threatens him." Richard's expression had gone cold. This is exactly the kind of defensiveness I'm talking about. Unable to accept criticism, viewing every challenge as a personal attack. "I accept criticism all the time," Elena interrupted. "What I don't accept is you using this board as a platform to undermine me because you're still bitter. You didn't get my father's job. You want to be COO. Then propose it as a genuine operational need, not as a power grab dressed up as concern for the company." The room went silent. Claire cleared her throat. "I think we've heard enough from both parties. The board will deliberate and vote on Richard's proposal. Elena, Adrian, you're excused. Outside in the hallway, Adrian felt like he'd just run a marathon. Elena leaned against the wall, eyes closed. Well, we did what we could, she said. You were amazing in there. We were amazing, you and me together. She opened her eyes. Whatever happens, I don't regret this fight. They waited in Elena's office, neither of them able to focus on anything else. Patricia stopped by once to say the deliberations were taking longer than expected, which could be good or bad. Rebecca brought coffee that neither of them touched. 2 hours later, Claire called Elena's office. We've reached a decision. Can you come back to the boardroom? They walked back together, and Adrian noticed Elena's hand was trembling slightly. He wanted to take it, offer some physical reassurance, but they were in a hallway with people watching. So he just stayed close, a presence beside her. The board was already seated when they entered. Claire's expression was neutral, giving nothing away. The board has voted on Richard's proposal to create a COO position with oversight authority over the CEO. The motion fails, 7 votes to 5. Adrian felt relief crash over him like a wave. Elena's posture didn't change, but he saw her exhale. However, Claire continued, the board agrees that additional operational support would benefit the company. We're proposing the creation of a chief strategy officer position to help with long-term planning and board relations. This person would report to the CEO, not oversee her. We'd like to begin a search process immediately. Elena nodded. That's acceptable. Richard, Claire said, turning to him. Your concerns have been heard and addressed. We appreciate your commitment to the company, but this board has confidence in Elena's leadership. If you'd like to be considered for the CSO position, you're welcome to apply through the standard process. Richard's jaw was tight, but he managed a professional nod. Of course. Then we're adjourned. The board members filed out, several of them stopping to shake Elena's hand or offer quiet words of support. Richard left without looking at either of them. In the elevator down to Elena's office, Adrian finally let himself feel it. They'd won. Again. Against odds that should have buried them both, they'd won. You know he's not going to stop, Adrian said. I know. But we bought time, and we proved that fighting back works. Elena looked at him. Thank you for standing with me today, for putting yourself out there when you could have just kept your head down. We're a team. That's what teams do. Are we? A team. The question hung in the air, weighted with something Adrian couldn't quite name. He thought about all the ways their lives had become tangled together, the night in her apartment, the job offer, the investigations, the battles. He thought about Mia asking if Elena was nice, and the way Elena had looked at his daughter with genuine warmth. Yeah, Adrian said. I think we are. The weeks after the board meeting settled into something that almost felt like normalcy, though Adrian had learned that normal in this world was just the eye of a storm, temporary peace before the next crisis hit. Gerald followed through on the Newark project, delivering weekly reports that were thorough and professional, if not exactly friendly. Richard kept his distance, focusing on his role and avoiding direct confrontation, though Adrian could feel the man's resentment radiating across every meeting they shared. And Elena threw herself into work with an intensity that seemed designed to prove something, though Adrian wasn't sure to whom. Adrian's one-year review was scheduled for mid-November, and as the date approached, he found himself cataloging everything he'd accomplished, everything he'd learned, and everything he still didn't know. The leadership development program the board had mandated turned out to be useful. A series of workshops on corporate communication, conflict resolution, and strategic planning taught by a consultant who didn't care about his unconventional background and just focused on helping him get better at the job. The executive coach, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, was tougher. She made him confront the ways he alienated people without meaning to, the ways his directness read as arrogance to those who didn't know him, the ways his outsider status could be either an asset or a liability depending on how he wielded it. You have good instincts, Dr. Chen told him during one of their sessions, but instincts aren't enough at this level. You need to learn when to push and when to build consensus, when to be direct and when to be diplomatic. Sounds exhausting. It is. That's why most people at your level burn out within 3 years. The question is whether you're willing to do the work to be the exception. Adrian thought about that a lot. Was he willing? Did he even want to stay in this world long term with its constant politics and battles and surveillance? Some days the answer was obvious, yes, because the work mattered, and he was good at it. Other days, usually after Gerald had passive-aggressively questioned one of his decisions in a department meeting or Richard had made some cutting remark about unconventional leadership styles, Adrian wanted to walk away from all of it and go back to fixing things with his hands instead of navigating corporate warfare. But then he'd look at the safety metrics, at the injury reports that showed real people going home healthy instead of hurt, and he'd remember why he was here. Mia adjusted to her new school after the suspension better than Adrian expected. The principal had recommended transferring her to a different elementary school, one in a better district that Adrian could now afford, and the change seemed to help. New kids, new teachers, new start. She made friends quickly, joined the art club, and stopped coming home with stories about bullies. Adrian tried not to feel guilty about the fact that money had solved the problem so easily, but the guilt lingered anyway. How many other kids were stuck in bad situations because their parents couldn't afford to move them somewhere better? One Saturday in late October, Adrian took Mia to the Newark facility for the final walkthrough before they officially completed the remediation project. Gerald was already there with Karen and the local facility manager, and they spent 2 hours going through every system, every upgrade, every change that had been made. Ventilation is running perfectly, the facility manager said, showing them the new control systems. Air quality readings are better than standard, and the workers are thrilled. You can actually breathe in here now. Adrian watched Mia taking it all in, her eyes wide as she looked at the massive industrial space, the machinery, the people working. She stayed close to him but didn't seem scared, just curious. "This is what you do?" she asked. "You make places safer?" "That's part of it, yeah." "That's pretty cool, Dad." Gerald overheard and something crossed his face. Not quite warmth, but maybe recognition. After the walkthrough, as they were heading back to their cars, Gerald pulled Adrian aside. "The project came in on time and under budget," Gerald said. "I wanted you to know that before I file the final report." "That's good work, Gerald. Thank you." "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because it's my job." But Gerald's tone wasn't hostile, just matter of fact. "But I will say this. You were right about the ventilation being critical. I pushed to delay it in favor of other priorities, and that would have been a mistake. So, credit where it's due." It was the closest thing to an apology Adrian was likely to get, and he accepted it for what it was. "I appreciate you saying that. Don't expect us to be friends. I still think you got lucky with this position." "That's fair. I think I got lucky too." Gerald almost smiled at that. Then he headed to his car, and Adrian was left standing there wondering if they'd just achieved something resembling professional respect, or if this was just another temporary ceasefire. "I like him," Mia said, appearing at Adrian's elbow. "He seems grumpy but nice underneath." That's probably accurate. The one-year review happened on a cold Tuesday morning, the kind of November day where the sky was gray and the wind cut through your coat no matter how many layers you wore. Adrian arrived at headquarters early, his stomach churning with nerves that felt ridiculous given everything he'd already survived. But this was different. This wasn't about defending himself against an attack. This was about proving he deserved to stay. The review panel consisted of Claire Hendricks, Patricia Liu, and a new board member named Marcus Webb, who joined after the last round of elections. They met in a small conference room, the kind designed for serious conversations, and Adrian tried not to read too much into the fact that Elena wasn't there. She'd recused herself from the formal review to avoid any appearance of bias, though Adrian knew she was probably sitting in her office going crazy waiting for news. "Mr. Cole," Claire began, "thank you for being here. This review is a follow-up to the conditions set by the investigation committee a year ago. We're here to assess your growth, your impact, and whether you should continue in your current role." "I understand. Let's start with the Leadership Development Program. Dr. Chen submitted a report on your progress. She noted that you've been receptive to feedback and have shown significant improvement in areas like stakeholder management and communication. Can you give us an example of how you've applied what you learned?" Adrian had prepared for this question. "When I first started, I had a tendency to make decisions quickly and then inform people after the fact. That worked in my previous roles, but here it created friction. People felt like I wasn't listening to them or valuing their expertise. Dr. Chen helped me understand that speed isn't always more important than consensus. So now, on major projects, I bring my team into the decision-making process earlier. I present options, ask for input, and make it clear that I'm weighing their perspectives. It takes longer, but the buy-in is stronger and the implementation is smoother. Patricia nodded. We've heard similar feedback from your direct reports. Most of them report that your management style has evolved significantly. Gerald Moss, in particular, noted that while he still has reservations about your background, he respects your willingness to collaborate. Gerald and I had a rough start, but we found a way to work together. About that, Marcus said. Walk us through the Newark project. That was a major undertaking, and there was significant internal resistance to the scope and cost. Adrian did, explaining the risk assessment, the budget justification, the implementation challenges, and the outcomes. He didn't sugarcoat the difficulties or pretend everything had gone smoothly. He was honest about the fact that he'd underestimated the political pushback and had to learn how to navigate resistance from people like Gerald, who had legitimate concerns that needed to be addressed rather than overruled. The end result, Adrian concluded, is that we have a facility that's safer, more efficient, and in full compliance. But the process taught me that being right isn't enough. You have to bring people along with you, or even a good decision becomes a battle. Claire made notes. Let's talk numbers. Your department has consistently come in under budget while improving outcomes across multiple metrics. That's unusual. How did you achieve that? By focusing on prevention instead of reaction. Most of the budget overruns in safety, and operations come from treating problems after they become crises. Equipment fails, someone gets hurt, and suddenly you're paying for emergency repairs and legal settlements and regulatory fines. I shifted the focus to identifying potential failures before they happen. It costs more upfront, but it saves millions on the back end. And the cultural changes in your department? Patricia asked. We've seen significant improvement in employee satisfaction and retention. What drove that? Listening. The people doing the work know what's broken, but they'd been ignored for so long they'd stopped trying to report problems. I made it clear that I wanted to hear about issues, that reporting problems wouldn't be punished, and that we'd actually do something about the concerns they raised. Turns out when people feel like they matter, they do better work. The review continued for another hour, covering everything from specific project outcomes to his relationships with other departments to his long-term vision for the role. By the end, Adrian felt wrung out, but cautiously hopeful. He'd been honest, he'd shown growth, and he'd let the results speak for themselves. Thank you, Mr. Cole, Claire said. We'll deliberate and have a decision for you by end of day. Adrian spent the rest of the morning trying to work and mostly staring at his computer screen. Rebecca brought him coffee he didn't drink. Karen stopped by to ask how it went, and he couldn't give her a good answer because he genuinely didn't know. And at 2 p.m, Elena appeared in his doorway. You're not supposed to be here, Adrian said. Conflict of interest. The review's over. I'm allowed to check on my friend. Is that what we are? Friends? Elena came in and closed the door. I don't know what we are, Adrian. We're something. Colleagues, allies, people who've survived multiple attempts to destroy us. Pick your label. How about 2 people who are probably too stubborn for their own good? That works? She sat down across from him. I'm sorry you had to go through this. The review, the investigation last year, all of it. You shouldn't have had to prove yourself this many times. It's fine. That's how it works here. It shouldn't be. You've done incredible work. You've saved this company money, protected our workers, and changed the culture of an entire department. That should be enough. The fact that people are still questioning whether you belong here is absurd. Elena, you're the one who taught me that results and perception are 2 different things. I've learned to live with that. Well, I hate it. I hate that you have to work twice as hard as everyone else to get half the credit. I hate that Richard and people like him get to coast on their credentials and their connections while you have to fight for every inch of respect. It's not fair. Life's not fair. I figured that out a long time ago. Elena looked at him for a long moment. You're different than when you started. Harder, maybe. More cynical. Or just more realistic. I hope we haven't ruined you. This place, this job. I hope you still remember who you were before all this. Adrian thought about the man who'd worked at the Meridian Hotel, fixing toilets and changing light bulbs and feeling invisible. He thought about pulling Elena out of that bar, about accepting a job he wasn't qualified for because the alternative was staying stuck forever. He thought about everything that had happened since, all the battles and betrayals and small victories. I remember, he said, but I'm not that person anymore. I've changed, That's not a bad thing. At 4:30, Claire called Adrian's office. We've reached a decision. Can you come to the executive conference room? This time, Elena went with him. When they arrived, the review panel was there along with several other board members, including Richard. Adrian's stomach dropped. This felt formal, final. Claire stood. Mr. Cole, the review panel has completed our assessment of your performance and growth over the past year. Our findings are as follows. You have demonstrated significant professional development in areas the board identified as concerns. Your leadership style has matured without losing the qualities that made you effective. Your department has achieved measurable improvements in safety, efficiency, and cost management. And perhaps most importantly, you've shown that unconventional backgrounds can bring valuable perspectives to corporate leadership. Adrian felt hope-building but didn't let himself believe it yet. The review panel votes unanimously to continue your employment without conditions. Furthermore, we're recommending a promotion. Effective immediately, you're being appointed Senior Vice President of Operations and Safety, with expanded authority and a seat on the executive leadership team. Adrian couldn't breathe. A promotion. Not just survival, but recognition that he'd earned the right to be here. There's more, Patricia said. Your compensation is being adjusted to reflect the new role. $280,000 base salary plus performance bonuses and stock options. Congratulations, Adrian. Elena was grinning, and even some of the board members who'd been skeptical were nodding approvingly. Richard's expression was carefully neutral, but Adrian could see the anger simmering underneath. Thank you, Adrian managed. I won't let you down. After the meeting, after the handshakes and congratulations, and Patricia pulling him aside to discuss the compensation package details, Adrian found himself alone with Elena in the hallway outside the conference room. SVP, Elena said. That's executive level. You're one of the top 5 people in this company now. That's insane. That's deserved. She was looking at him with something Adrian couldn't quite name, pride maybe, or vindication. You did this, Adrian, not me, not luck, not whatever people want to claim. You earned this. We did it, you and me together. Yeah, Elena said softly. We did. There was a moment where they just stood there, and Adrian felt the weight of everything that had happened between them since that night in the hotel bar. She'd changed his life. He'd saved hers. They'd fought battles together and survived when they should have lost. And somewhere in all of that, they'd become something more than boss and employee, more than allies. Something that didn't have a name but felt solid and real. I should go tell Mia, Adrian said, breaking the moment. She's going to want to know. Go, celebrate with your daughter. We'll figure out the transition details next week. Adrian left headquarters feeling like he was walking on air. The train ride home passed in a blur, and when he walked into the apartment, Mia was at the kitchen table doing homework, exactly where he'd left her that morning. Guess what? Adrian said. Mia looked up. You got promoted? How did you know? Because you're smiling like crazy, and you never smile like that unless something really good happened. She jumped up and hugged him. I'm proud of you, Dad. Thanks, kiddo. This means more money, better benefits. I'm thinking we could look for a bigger apartment, maybe even a place with your own room that's not the size of a closet. Really? Really? You deserve it. Mia hugged him tighter. You deserve it too. You work really hard. That night, after Mia went to bed, Adrian sat in the living room of their small apartment and thought about how far he'd come. A year and a half ago, he'd been scraping by, invisible and struggling. Now he was a senior vice president at a major company, with financial security he'd never imagined and a future that actually looked hopeful. It was overwhelming and terrifying and wonderful all at once. His phone buzzed. Elena. I can't stop thinking about something, she said when he answered. What? That night, when you found me in the hotel bar. If you'd walked past, if you'd assumed someone else would help, if you'd done what most people did and just looked the other way, none of this would have happened. I'd probably be dead, or at minimum, I would have lost the board vote the next day. And you'd still be working maintenance, never knowing what you were capable of. That's a lot of what ifs. I know. But Adrian, do you ever think about it? How one split-second decision changed both our lives? All the time. Sometimes I can't believe this is real. It's real. You're real. And I just wanted you to know that I don't take it for granted. What you did for me, what you've continued to do. You didn't just save my life that night. You saved me from becoming the kind of leader who forgets what actually matters. Elena, I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable or admitting that I need people, but I need you to know that you matter to me, not as an employee, not as an ally, as a person, as someone I trust more than almost anyone. Adrian didn't know what to say to that. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things neither of them seemed ready to name. Get some sleep, Elena said finally. We have a lot of work to do. SVP Cole. Yeah, we do. The transition into the new role was smoother than Adrian expected, mostly because he'd already been doing much of the work that came with the expanded authority. His team threw him a small celebration, and even Gerald offered grudging congratulations. Richard avoided him entirely, which Adrian considered a win. But the real test came 3 months later, when a crisis hit that would define everything Adrian had built. It started with a phone call at 2 in the morning. Adrian fumbled for his phone, seeing Karen's name on the screen. Adrian, we have a situation. The Chicago warehouse. There's been an accident. He was instantly awake. How bad? Bad. Part of the roof collapsed during the night shift. Multiple injuries, possibly fatalities. Emergency services are on scene. I'm heading there now. I'll meet you there. Text me the address. Adrian threw on clothes, left a note for Mia with his neighbor, who had a spare key, and caught the first available flight to Chicago. During the 3-hour journey, he coordinated with Karen, the facility manager, and the company's legal team trying to piece together what had happened. The roof collapse appeared to be related to structural failures that had been reported months ago but never addressed. If that was true, it was a catastrophic failure of the very systems Adrian had been hired to fix. When he arrived at the warehouse, it was chaos. Emergency vehicles everywhere, workers gathered in shocked groups, and news crews already setting up. Adrian found Karen near the command center that had been established by first responders. What do we know? 3 workers seriously injured, 1 critical. The section of roof that collapsed was in an area where we'd identified structural concerns 6 months ago. The repairs were supposed to happen in the spring, but they got delayed. Delayed why? Budget reallocation. Finance pushed it back to next quarter because we had unexpected expenses elsewhere. Adrian felt sick. People were hurt, possibly dying, because someone in finance had decided that spreadsheet numbers mattered more than structural integrity. This was exactly the kind of thing he'd been trying to prevent. Get me everything, he told Karen. Every inspection report, every maintenance request, every email about those repairs. I need to know the complete chain of decision-making that led to this. Over the next 8 hours, Adrian worked with local authorities, coordinated medical care for the injured workers, spoke with traumatized employees, and started building a timeline of the failure. And what he found made him furious. The structural concerns had been flagged by the local facility team and reported up through proper channels. Adrian's department had prioritized them and submitted a budget request for immediate repairs. But someone in finance, Adrian traced it back to a director named Philip Morse, who reported to Patricia, had marked it as non-urgent and pushed it to the next fiscal year. When the facility team followed up, they'd been told to work with their existing budget and make it happen, which was impossible given the scope of the repairs needed. By the time Adrian flew back to headquarters 2 days later, 1 worker was still in critical condition and the entire company was facing intense scrutiny from regulators and the media. The board called an emergency meeting, and Adrian walked into that conference room knowing this was the moment when everything he'd built would either prove its worth or crumble. Mr. Cole, Claire said, walk us through what happened. Adrian did, methodically and without sugarcoating anything. He explained the timeline, the budget decisions, the communication failures. He took responsibility for not escalating the issue more aggressively when finance pushed back, but he also made it clear where the systemic failures had occurred. So you're saying finance is responsible for this accident? Richard asked, jumping on the opening. I'm saying that a decision was made to prioritize cost savings over safety, and that decision had consequences. Whether that rises to the level of responsibility is for others to determine. Patricia spoke up, her voice tight. Philip Morse made that decision without my knowledge or approval. He's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But Adrian, if your team had elevated this more forcefully, We did elevate it, multiple times. We were told to make it work with existing resources. Adrian met her eyes. Patricia, I respect you, but we can't build a culture of safety if finance has veto power over critical repairs without operational input. That's a structural problem that goes beyond any individual decision. The room went silent. Then Claire leaned forward. What's your recommendation? This was it. The moment Adrian could play it safe or push for the changes he knew were necessary. We need to restructure our capital allocation process for safety-critical repairs. Any structural integrity issue, any life safety concern, gets automatic priority funding outside the normal budget cycle. Operations and safety makes the determination of what qualifies, finance executes it, and executive leadership reviews quarterly to ensure we're not abusing the system. That way, we never again have a situation where someone's deciding whether a human life is worth the line item on a spreadsheet. Richard scoffed. That's giving your department essentially unlimited authority to spend company money. No, it's giving my department the authority to keep people alive. If you think those two things are the same, then we have bigger problems than this accident. Several board members looked uncomfortable, but Claire was nodding slowly. Draft a proposal, she said. We'll review it at the next full board meeting. In the meantime, Adrian, you're in charge of the accident investigation and remediation. Whatever you need, you have authority to make it happen. The investigation took 3 weeks and confirmed everything Adrian suspected. The structural failure was preventable. The budget decision was flawed, and the communication breakdown between departments had allowed a critical issue to fall through the cracks. Philip Morse was terminated. The worker in critical condition survived but would need months of recovery. And Adrian spent long nights wondering if there was something more he could have done, some way he could have pushed harder before people got hurt. Elena found him in his office one evening, staring at the accident reports. You can't blame yourself for this, she said. Can't I? I knew finance was blocking critical repairs. I should have gone over Patricia's head, should have brought it to you directly. And I should have built better systems to prevent this in the first place. We can both carry guilt, Adrian, or we can fix the problem so it doesn't happen again. I'm trying. The proposal I drafted, it's comprehensive, but it's going to be expensive. The board might not go for it. Then we make them understand what's at stake. Not money, not liability, but actual human lives. Elena sat down across from his desk. This is why you're here, Adrian. This is why I hired you. Because you see people, not just numbers. Because you understand that every safety metric represents someone's parent or spouse or child. That's the perspective this company needed, and it's the perspective I need you to keep fighting for. The board meeting where Adrian presented his proposal was tense. He walked them through every element of the new safety funding protocol, explaining how it would work, what it would cost, and why it was necessary. Richard raised objections about fiscal responsibility. Thomas questioned whether Adrian was overreacting, but Patricia surprisingly backed him up. I've reviewed Adrian's analysis, she said, and while the upfront costs are significant, the risk mitigation value is clear. We're talking about preventing not just accidents, but regulatory fines, litigation, and reputational damage. This is good business. The vote passed 9-3, with Richard, Thomas, and one other board member dissenting. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. After the meeting, Patricia pulled Adrian aside. I owe you an apology. I should have caught Philip's decision before it caused harm. I was too focused on quarterly numbers and not enough on operational reality. We all missed it, Patricia. That's why we need better systems. Still, you've handled this entire crisis with integrity. A lot of people in your position would have tried to deflect blame or cover their tracks. You didn't. That's not who I am. I know. That's why you're valuable to this company. The new safety protocols went into effect immediately, and over the following months, Adrian saw the culture shift. Facility managers reported issues more readily. Finance worked collaboratively with operations instead of adversarially, and the accident rate across all locations dropped by another 30%. But the real vindication came 8 months later, when the company's annual report showed record profits alongside industry-leading safety metrics. Elena presented the results at the shareholders' meeting, and she made sure to highlight Adrian's work specifically. Our commitment to operational excellence and worker safety isn't just the right thing to do morally, Elena told the shareholders. It's the right thing to do financially. Under Adrian Cole's leadership, we've proven that protecting people and protecting profits aren't competing priorities. They're complementary ones. Adrian watched from the side of the room, and for the first time since accepting this job, he felt like he truly belonged. Not because of his title or his salary or his office with the city view, but because the work he was doing mattered. He was making a real difference in people's lives. That night, Elena invited him to dinner to celebrate. Not a corporate dinner, just the two of them at a small restaurant where the tables were close together and the lighting was warm. To survival, Elena said, raising her glass. To doing more than just surviving, Adrian countered. They talked about everything except work. Mia's school, Elena's frustration with dating when everyone either wanted something from her or was intimidated by her. Adrian's attempts to figure out if he actually liked opera or if he just felt like he should now that he could afford tickets. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that reminded Adrian that underneath all the corporate battles and boardroom drama, they were just two people trying to figure out their lives. "Can I tell you something?" Elena said as they were finishing dessert. "That night, when you found me in the hotel bar, I was terrified, not just of dying, but of failing, of proving everyone right who said I wasn't ready to lead this company. And you didn't just save my life, you gave me permission to be human, to be scared and imperfect, and still worthy of the position I'd been given. Elena, you were already worthy. You just needed to see it. Maybe, but I needed someone to show me. You did that." She paused. "I don't know what we are to each other, Adrian. I don't know if there's a word for it, but I know that you're one of the most important people in my life, and I want to make sure you know that." Adrian felt something settle in his chest, something warm and solid. "You're important to me, too. You gave me a chance when nobody else would have. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's not something I forget. So we're even then. I don't think it works that way. I think we just keep choosing to show up for each other, and that's enough." Elena smiled. "I can live with that." They left the restaurant and walked through the city streets, past the building where Adrian used to work as maintenance, past the hotel bar where they'd first met. So much had changed, but the city itself remained constant, indifferent to their struggles, unmoved by their victories. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked, "taking this job, entering this world?" Adrian thought about Mia, thriving in her new school. He thought about the workers going home safe because of systems he'd built. He thought about the battles he'd fought and the ones he'd won and the person he'd become through all of it. "No," he said, "I don't regret it. It's been hard, and some days I still feel like I don't belong. But I'm doing work that matters. I'm providing for my daughter, and I've learned that I'm capable of more than I ever imagined." That's all any of us can hope for, isn't it? To discover we're stronger than we thought. Yeah, I guess it is. 3 years after walking into Vaughn Industries for the first time, Adrian stood in his office looking out at the city and took stock of his life. Mia was 13 now, confident and thriving, already talking about high school and college and everything she wanted to do. His relationship with Gerald had evolved into something resembling genuine respect, the two of them working together without the constant undercurrent of hostility. Richard had eventually left the company to pursue other opportunities, which everyone agreed was code for being quietly forced out by a board that had lost patience with his constant challenges to Elena's leadership. And Elena herself had grown into her role in ways that made Adrian proud, proving again and again that she was exactly the leader the company needed. The work was still hard. There were still crises, still battles, still days when Adrian wondered if he'd made the right choices. But he'd learned that doubt and certainty weren't opposites. They were companions, both necessary for growth. He'd learned that belonging wasn't something you achieved once and kept forever, but something you earned again and again through your actions. And he'd learned that the distance between where you start and where you end up mattered less than what you did with the opportunities you were given along the way. His phone buzzed. "Mia, checking in after school. How was your day?" "Good," Adrian typed back. "How was yours?" "Boring. Can we get pizza for dinner?" "Sure, I'll be home by 6. Love you, Dad." "Love you too, kiddo." Adrian set his phone down and turned back to his desk, where reports waited for his review and decisions needed to be made. But before diving back into work, he allowed himself a moment to appreciate the simple fact that he was here, in this office, doing this work, building this life. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was his, earned through effort and courage and a willingness to believe he could be more than what everyone assumed. That night, sitting at the dinner table with Mia, sharing pizza and listening to her talk about her art project and her friends and everything that filled her world, Adrian thought about the path that had led him here. One desperate night, one split-second decision to help a stranger, one improbable offer that changed everything. He thought about Elena fighting her board, about Gerald learning to respect someone who came from nowhere, about all the workers who went home safe because someone had finally cared enough to fix what was broken. And he thought about the fundamental truth he'd learned through all of this, that worth wasn't determined by where you came from or what credentials you carried, but by what you did with the chances you were given. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That belonging was something you built through your choices, not something granted by others' approval. "Dad?" Mia said, pulling him from his thoughts. "You're doing that thing again where you zone out." "Sorry, just thinking." "About what?" "About how lucky I am. To have you, to have this life, all of it." Mia rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "You're getting sappy in your old age." "I'm 34. Like I said, old." Adrian laughed and threw a napkin at her, and Mia shrieked and threw one back, and for a moment they were just a father and daughter being silly in their apartment, unburdened by corporate politics or past struggles or anything except the simple joy of being together. Later, after Mia went to bed, Adrian sat alone in the quiet apartment and let himself feel the weight of everything he'd survived, everything he'd built, everything he'd become. The journey from invisible maintenance worker to senior executive wasn't a straight line or a fairy tale. It was messy and hard and full of moments where failure seemed certain. But he'd persevered, he'd learned, he'd grown, and maybe that was the real story worth telling, not that someone had rescued him or that luck had intervened, but that when given the chance to be more than what the world expected, he'd taken it. That when tested, he'd proven himself. That when knocked down, he'd gotten back up. His phone rang. Elena's name on the screen. "It's late," Adrian said when he answered. "I know, but I wanted to tell you something. The board finalized the succession planning today. When I eventually step down as CEO, whenever that happens, your name is on the short list." Adrian's breath caught. "Elena, I'm not saying it'll be you. There are other strong candidates, but you're in the conversation, from maintenance supervisor to potential CEO candidate in 3 years. That's not luck, Adrian. That's you earning every single step." "I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting for what's right. Keep showing everyone that where you come from matters less than who you choose to be." After she hung up, Adrian sat in the darkness and let the possibility settle over him. CEO. The idea was absurd and terrifying and somehow, impossibly, not entirely out of reach. He didn't know if it would happen. Didn't know if he even wanted it to happen. But the fact that it could, that a kid from nowhere who'd spent years being invisible had climbed this far, meant something. It meant that the old rules didn't apply anymore. The credentials and connections and pedigree weren't the only paths to success. That sometimes, just sometimes, seeing someone's potential mattered more than their resume. And that courage, the kind of courage it took to help a stranger, to accept an impossible job, to keep fighting when everyone doubted you, could reshape not just one life, but many. Adrian turned off the lights and headed to bed, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The battles weren't over. They never would be. But he'd learned to fight them, learned to survive them, learned to turn obstacles into opportunities. And that knowledge, hard-won and tested through fire, was worth more than any title or salary or corner office. In the end, the story wasn't about a CEO who almost died or a maintenance worker who became an executive. It was about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose to take risks when safety seemed smarter, and who proved that belief in someone's potential could be just as powerful as any credential or connection. It was about learning that strength wasn't the absence of fear or doubt, but the willingness to move forward despite them. And it was about discovering that the distance between who you are and who you could be was sometimes just one courageous decision away. Adrian had made that decision, and in doing so, he'd changed not just his own life, but the lives of everyone around him. That was legacy. That was impact. That was proof that one person, given a chance and refusing to waste it, could make all the difference in the world. And as he drifted off to sleep, Adrian Cole, former maintenance worker, current SVP, future unknown, felt at peace with the journey that had brought him here and ready for whatever road still lay ahead.